Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and Lauren streamer, and today we're going to be doing a book review. I know it feels like it's been forever since I've done a book review. We'll try and be better about that. I have such a list that I think it's really just burnout, and so we're gonna try to stay on top of it a little bit better. Try to intersperse some shorter ones somehow. But here we are with Polaris Rising. Also, we survived the hurricane. So thank you everybody for your prayers and good vibes. Been doing good. Only lost power for like 2 days. Before we get into the book review, though, a couple of things. Number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoi, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover that we read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work, just get a little, a free sample like at Sam's Club that gets you to buy your month's supply of mozzarella sticks. That's what we do here. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Bodymore Zero, comes out at the end of this month, featuring these fine gentlemen over here. If you check it out, I hope you have a good time. If you don't check it out, I understand. I write for the niche audience that is me. With that said, let's jump into Polaris Rising, the Consortium Rebellion, book number 1. So I don't remember how this book came to me. Somebody recommended it to me for one reason or another, and I was trying to get out of my slump because obviously I've been struggling a bit. And so I went through my library to be like, what exactly do I have that feels like it could be an easy read that maybe might not have as many notes? Chat, this still has a crap ton of notes. But I picked up this book. And it has been so long, likely years, since this was recommended to me. So I can't tell you how it ended up in my TBR, but here we are. So we're going to go through it together and learn some writing lessons together through it. And from reading this book, we have also come up with the new classification, Sci-Spice, or Rofi. You can take your choice between Sci-Spice or Rofi. I'm feeling Sci-Spice because, we got romantasy. This is sci-fi's version of romantasy. So thanks for that. Getting into it. It opens with the main character, Ada, fighting a bunch of mercs and doing a good job at keeping up with them when they outweigh her by 50 pounds. But she is ultimately knocked over the head, and they are told to put her with their other prisoner named Locke. She figures Locke's good because he makes them nervous to be around. I don't know why you would put this priceless captive who has a lot of money on her head next to this guy who is actually a criminal with lots of money on his head. She is a runaway royal. So they're not even in the same category, but yeah, put them in the same prisoner room. We also learned that she was injected with nanobots as a baby that would start healing her eventually at some point. Give it some time. Immediately taking her to Locke, the dude that is escorting Ada threatens him not to touch her, which just makes you go, what's the point of putting her in the room with him? Quote, we get, quote, "Where do you want her?" one of the other men asked. "She can stay in the captain started, but the blonde, presumably John, cut him off. "Put her in with Locke, that'll teach the little hellion a lesson. It's not like he's using the space anyway." "Why, Gerald, you shouldn't have," a deep voice rumbled from within the room. "I didn't," the captain snapped. "She's worth 3 times what you are, Locke, so you don't want to make me choose which of you to keep," he continued. "Keep your comments to yourself or I'll purge you. Same thing happens if you even look at her sideways." If you want to skin Locke, just do it. You don't need him to threaten to molest her in order to skin him. And then I'm assuming it means that they can deliver him dead or alive and still collect the amount. But you'd think that dropping him off would be top priority, but I don't know even where they're supposed to drop Locke off to get the money. Anyway, so she miscalculated who Locke was or why they didn't like him. She's left there. I guess this guy is a criminal that they're holding, but more than being a criminal, he is probably under arrest for being a hottie. Quote, far more interesting than Yamato Door was the man sharing the cell with me. Even through the slight distortion of the blue energy barrier, I saw that deeply bronzed flesh wrapped his heavily muscled frame. Broad shoulders tapered to a narrow waist with rippling abs, defined arms, and muscled legs completed the picture. It was only after I stared for a solid 5 seconds that I realized why I was seeing quite so much of him. He had been stripped down to only a pair of skin-tight black boxer briefs. "Like what you see?" he asked with a smirk. "Yes," I said after a few more seconds of frank appraisal. Surprise flashed across his face, but why would I lie? He was beautifully built. He was perhaps not conventionally handsome, but he had a deep primal appeal. One glance, and you knew that this was a man who could take care of problems. Had that deep, gravelly voice, and he was Temptation Incarnate. Temptation Incarnate is a good band name, let's be real. He's chained to a wall with some electrical chains that are apparently in safe mode so that it won't hurt her if she touches them. Convenient. She determines that she has like a week before they get back to her place where she's going to be handed over to her family and she's going to be in trouble again. The captain is not wasting time here. She needs to get out before she gets taken back. She's feeling around the cell, trying to be subtle since there are cameras up there and she doesn't want people to know what's going on, but I also don't get how you very subtly. A person that she describes as a kid, probably 16, comes in to tell her to put on this dress to go and eat with the captain. She refuses, saying that she'll be in her all-black attire that she is used to, and she is not putting on a freaking dress. What is this, Beauty and the Beast? No. The Beast is in the prison, and he is a hottie McBody. So, no. The terms are accepted without a fight, and she says that she'd fight off the guard and make a run for it if the guard wasn't a kid. I don't know why the kid is the exception. I guess she just doesn't want to spank because she might be afraid of motherhood at this point, and that would make her feel too much like a parent. She also judges the mercs for not appreciating the ship that they've got. But she's also judging the mercs around for not appreciating the ship that they're using enough. Quote, I saw at least 3 major wiring issues that would get them grounded if a safety officer even bothered to do an inspection. The ship was holding up well for her age, but it was apparent that either the captain or his crew didn't truly love her. I, however, saw plenty of love. Access panels were open or missing. The wiring issues would be an easy way to disable some key ship systems, and the layout matched the reference layout. I could find my way around even in the dark. So she's like, I have the knowledge of a lover on this ship. She is delivered to the captain in his quarters. Quote, I pull on my public persona, affixed my politest smile to my lips, and tried not to think stabby thoughts. Thank you for the dinner invitation, Captain. It's here that we learn that she's a runaway bride of someone with a lot of money, one of the 3 main houses, and by houses, it's like royalty. She's left of her own volition. She left of her own volition, and her dad put a bounty on her to bring her back. She's been on the run for 2 years. However, if she's this valuable of a daughter of someone with lots of money with a big bounty on her head for return, why put her in a shared cell with Locke, who they had to threaten to not make moves on her or to put her in danger? Surely there were better options, like chained to the captain's bedroom. I'm just getting heavy Pawn and the Puppet vibes here, where, Skylena was put in the same room as What's-His-Face, and he could escape at any time as he wanted, and the chains were so stupid, he escaped them. Also, turns out this guy is some kind of noble, the captain of this ship, who hired a group of mercs to find Locke. And when they did, Locke killed 2 people, and he is sure that the mercs are planning to kill him because they lost members of their crew. He's already told Ada's dad that she has been found and that they are on their way. Shortly thereafter, he's good and toasted, despite being worried about the mercs trying to kill him. He tells Ada that she can sleep in his room. She chooses to go back to the brig because she doesn't want to share his bed with him. which again, she's a runaway bride. She's promised to one of the 3 big houses in the universe. And you really want to try your best to snoo somebody, some other man's wife or wife to be. Sounds like the quick way to get your dick and balls cut off before your head, and then to get them shoved down your neck socket. Back in the brig, she tells the teenager that she wants special accommodations and messes with the light panel to remove the barrier between her and Locke's cell, and also loosen Locke's chains. She's heard this dude's killed multiple people, and she's like, but I'm fine though. I'm not related to anybody that's ever screwed him over, despite being the daughter of a royal. You would think that he might have some negative opinions on her because she is from a nobility's house, and he's not going to know that she's not like them. Might be the hot vibes radiating off of her. This is a part where it gives away there is nothing to the story but a personal fantasy, because where is the logic or danger? Quote, the kid eyed the video display with distrust, but it was easy to see that Locke remained chained. I prayed that Locke wouldn't move or give away the fact the chains were longer, but he still stood in the same position, and I wondered if he was sleeping standing up. Was that even possible? She goes into the cell, immediately feels like she's in more danger because she has loosened the leash on the murderer. I wonder. Quote, I entered the dim cell and the door slammed closed behind me. Without energy fields separating us, Locke seemed bigger, more immediate, and vastly more dangerous. The enemy of the enemy is my friend. I just had to keep reminding myself that we both wanted the same thing. Do you, though? She says that she's more worried about him being maybe more dangerous and still, quote, did you miss me while I was gone? So she says that she's worried about him being more dangerous to her and she needs to ingratiate herself. Yet instead, as she approaches him, she says, quote, did you miss me while I was gone? I asked. No. Oh, that's too bad. Would you like to hear about the captain's quarters? No. I couldn't help the slightly evil edge to my smile as I began to describe in excruciating detail the captain's dining room. This is not what someone does if they ever believed that they are in danger. It's one of the reasons why these types of characters will always fail for me, because they cannot build triumph or stakes if she never actually feels like she's in danger. If there's no acknowledgement of risk, if there doesn't act like there's risk, if it doesn't act like I'm scared but I'm putting on a brave face, and then showing her recoil when she feels like she's at a disadvantage, because she is never at a disadvantage. This author of this book would never allow her to be at a disadvantage, and you see it in her actions, in her fearlessness, in her, I recognize that he is dangerous, but I am never actually in any real danger. I mean, we know that she likely isn't going to be because she is the main character, but you can still show the response of that first person to thinking that you are going to be harmed and having to work your way, maneuver around getting attacked by this animal. Even the most capable of characters have situations that they aren't on top of and can't just be sassy in everything. Once the guards are gone, she asks Locke if he's eaten, assumes that he hasn't been fed right because she's been on the Mercs teams before, and judges them for being ruthless, though she's been a part of them, and produces some dinner rolls out of her cargo pants because she stuffed her cargo pants with dinner rolls when she was with the captain. At least she's using those pockets. I can respect that. They introduce themselves. Locke is the so-called devil of Fork Snacks Zero, the man with the highest bounty in the verse, at least up until she showed up. So she's got the highest bounty. What you will notice also happens often in bad writing is the mostest. The characters always have to be the mostest. She is the highest bounty. He is the highest bounty. And it doesn't mean that you can't have those in your stories, or that it always means the sort of thing when they are in your stories. But if every single thing has to be the mostest, she is the mostest innocent, with also the hottest dressed, with also the mostest in every single capacity, it starts reading a certain way. She has a higher bounty than this actual wanted criminal, despite being an escort mission. I guess I can get it because she's irreplaceable because she's a royal child, but still, how much is she worth, really? We never actually get a number, so we just know that it's more than him, which also speaks to the lack of details that help fill out the actual situation. What is a lot of money in this situation? We don't know. Also, an extra bad move, putting someone worth so much money in a cell with a criminal who is also worth so much. You don't think that he'd use that to his advantage? She's then realizing where she knows him from out of nowhere. He was a deserter in a rebellion. It kills a bunch of people everywhere he goes, and no one can catch him, except apparently this group of mercs that's so far led by an incompetent bougie, and they left a 16-year-old to guard the killerest killer in the universe. Hello? If he's this bad and worth this much, maybe this merc ship should treat him that way. This brings me on a craft question that I do want to comment on. And this is not going to be pertinent for a lot of writers. It all depends on what your reason is for writing. However, if you are considering how do you make your situation believable, how do you give weight to your situation when you're writing something like this, you have multiple responses to a situation that either enforce or weaken the statements that your narrative makes. So if your narrative says this character is dangerous, then if people around him do not act like he is dangerous, then I, the reader, am not going to believe that he is dangerous, because the narrative saying the character is dangerous is not going to be enough. I need to see actions support the words that are being said, or else it's going to read like a lie. This is how you build a world that feels lived in, is the characters are abiding by the rules that are set and are responding to those rules. So if you are somebody who is crafting a story and you want to do something like this, you not only have to think about what you want to say about a character, this character is so badass, but you have to think of how the world responds to that character, and even how that character then responds to the world responding to them. I know it's a loop. If you think of Kiryu, okay, Kiryu is OP. He is within the story OP. It is canonical that his head is basically made of cement. And it shows. People don't really necessarily believe. They know that he is a legend, the Dragon of Dojima. They attack him. People pretend to be him, and they don't believe that he is who he is until they try to punch him, and it doesn't do anything, and they're like, oh, shoot, it is the dragon. And it is because of both the way that he acts, the rumors, and the way that they act towards him that enforces this legend and enforces this power. One thing that a lot of people tend to underestimate is how power scaling works, or how hierarchy works. And so if you build this story where somebody has magical abilities of some kind, and they're seen as this overseer, this super powerful, you have to show the awe or the respect, or have somebody who has a lot of power get bitch slapped down to show that leveling. One of the ways that this is shown in Body More Zero is where Casey acts like he is the top dog. Part of it is because of his survival instincts. If you read the book, you'll see what his character is and why he acts the way that he does. But so he always has to challenge. He always has to be the top dog, even when it is dealing with the supernatural like Val and Karen. And then he gets slapped down. Because despite him being willing to challenge and still thinking himself the top dog, the world will tell him he is not the top dog. He is not in control. And so that's what you need to see in stories if you want to enforce this idea of this legend. You can have people challenge, but the minute that you undermine your own hierarchy is the minute that nothing matters, because you've just proven that the hierarchy is bullshit because the characters can't even abide by it. And you can also look at, there's Kiryu as, again, another good example, because he is OP even when he is 20 years old. And he undermines the hierarchy by challenging the hierarchy of the Yakuza family that he was in. And they all recognize, holy smokes, this guy is strong. This guy is legendary even at 20 years old. But they still see him as an impudent child until he defeats them. And then they recognize, and it shows the shift. And he remains stoic and strong and believing, even when he's scared. One of the earlier moments in Yakuza 0, and I'm using this because Kiryu is OP, but he's still young. You still have the stakes. You still see his emotions as he goes through these things. And there is the moment when he's coming out of the club after fighting Kuze in the sewer, and seeing one of the other guys, Chicken Legs. I don't remember what his name is. I'm sorry. Yeah, I just remember the flashy purple suit and the chicken legs and Ishin. And that guy just killed the hostess chick that he was with and told Kiryu that Kiryu needed to get in line and that there were a bunch of Yakuza waiting for him upstairs. And Kiryu says that he is going to do what he thinks is right, and he is not going to get in line. And then he continues forward after watching this guy murder a woman in front of him. Goes up the stairs, and you see him pause and take a breath and prepare himself for the army he expects to be outside. And then he opens the doors. So even though you know that he is OP because he is the main character, because you know how the story is going to go, he still has the emotional fluctuations, and you see his emotional response to the situation he's in, which gives it power, which gives it authority. If 20-year-old Kiryu did not have that moment where he climbed the stairs and paused and was like, whatever happens is going to happen, but I have to do this. If you didn't see that, it wouldn't have as much power. I'll see if I can find the clip to drop here.
決まってんだろう。俺は行く。あんたは揺さぶりをかけたつもりかもしれねえが、死ぬか生きるかは大した問題じゃねえ。何言ってんだてめえ。あんたが楽しいかどうかで物事を決めるのと同じ。俺は好きか嫌いかで決めるだけだ。俺が行く理由はただ一つ。あんたと組むのが死ぬほど嫌だってことだ。キリュってねえ。なら撃たれる方がまだマシだ。
It's a great moment. Getting back to the story, Locke makes small talk asking Ada how she learned to fake talking to people, as if aristocrats don't do that all the time. Quote, after seeing the expression work so well for my mother, I'd practiced it in the mirror and wielded it without mercy. Lesser prey would flee at the merest hint of it. What you get throughout this story is the constant reminder of her public face, her mask that she puts on that all the people in her family learned to put on. But if you really think about it, she's just wielding resting bitch face without mercy. And it's slaying. Now, as she's talking to this guy, this hottie McBody with his panties on, she's not sure what to do but stare. Quote, he leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. All of that glorious skin and muscle was on display, which prompted a question. He's apparently naked because he kept producing shivs out of his clothing, so this was easier so he couldn't hide anything. Bedtime comes around and she has a hard time because she doesn't trust him and she doesn't want to die in the middle of the night. She's moved by the crew the next day, and as she is moved, she sees female mercs and thinks, quote, female mercenaries weren't rare, but they generally preferred either more gender-balanced groups or a higher-tier squads. Being the only woman on the ship that could spend months in space was a tough gig, especially with the men that made up most of the merc squads. Cream of the crop, they were not. She's given 3 minutes to clean up in the bathroom and then put back into her cell as she laments her father being controlling. Back in the cell, Locke greets her by saying, quote, that merc must really hate you, Locke said. He rolled to his feet in movement so smooth that it was a thing of beauty. Or it would have been if I didn't feel like a gazelle mesmerized by a lion. And he gets all up in her face and makes her feel things that she hasn't felt in years. Quote, his flesh was warm and firm. He leaned into my hand. Up close he was massive. It had been years since I felt dainty, but standing next to him, to the solid wall of muscle, I did. Locke knows that she stole a knife at the dinner table that night before. When they're having trouble keeping weapons away from him with prison breaks and they're putting her in the same room as him, I don't know why they wouldn't pat her down when returning her back to her office, especially because the one guy that took her to the bathroom's a perv, so why not? They're making the perfect scenario here for her to make deals with the outlaw that doesn't have any problems with killing them since he's already killed 2 of them before. He kisses her during the first distraction and steals the knife. The guards were onto this, though, and pulled the chains back and put the barrier up. Why they didn't do that sooner? Who knows? The kid from the night before comes in to feed them. Apparently, this kid who can't use the panels on the cell is the one that is left to deal with it, because then he has to ask Ada to come and help him pull the cells down to push the panel things so that he can feed Locke. Where is this man's big brother to show him how to do things? Why are they letting an incompetent child a competent teenager who doesn't know how to use the panels be the one to guard these two high-priced individuals? This is your human loot, buddy. So Locke sees she's manipulating the kid because he's a kid and incompetent, and she's like, bruh, no, do not out me. Do not tell this kid that I am manipulating him, okay? I need this. He shoots his shot a little too early while asking her for help, and he tries to grab onto her. So shoots his shot as in like he was touching her and being sexual, flirting with her, and now she's onto him. So it's not gonna work. With this master criminal, I don't know why he didn't think about how shooting his shot too early could mess him up, but with that, she sits down and thinks about how to escape with the emergency ship, if there even are any on this merc ship. She also thinks about how cunning she is because her daddy taught her and her siblings how to be cunning, because the whole purpose of being a royalty family is to spy on the other royalty families once you marry in. Blackmail and all that. Randomly, Locke butts into her meditation, because that's what she's doing in her cell, is meditating, staring at the wall, and he asks if she's sleeping. She answers no, and she says that she's thinking of how to escape. Don't you have cameras on this, girl? Don't you have cameras on this whole place so that you can see what is going on in there? They have nanobots, but they don't have high security with audio? Locke wants her trust. She is like, maybe you could earn it, but we don't have a lot of time, so we're just going to have to trust each other. And she tells him what's probably waiting for them with her dad, which is not good things. I don't know why Locke is going to her dad, other than I guess he should be going to a military tribunal, right? Not to her dad. Her dad could watch his execution, but like, both then become grumpy and quiet, trying to figure out ways out of the dungeon. Ada's got a plan where she works with Locke, and then one where she doesn't, because you got to cover all of your bases, and all of your bases are two. Like a highly intelligent individual. Ada's then grabbed for dinner with the captain, though it's not just Captain Gerald this time, it's also John, the dude who had been trying to cop a peep when she was cleaning up in the bathroom for just a couple of minutes. He's leering and innuendoing so hard that it's not even considered innuendoing in my opinion. She pretends to be meek while plotting how to kill him, which is another thing. If one of your characters is going to be considered high class and another one is going to be considered an anomaly because he is a soldier and he murders people, you really can't put them on the same plane, because then all of a sudden they are exactly the same. So why would she care if he murders people? Because she also casually murders people and casually thinks about killing people. Now you might be like, well, she's maybe sarcastically thinking, oh, I want to kill him, but she's literally sitting here plotting it, and it's not that big of a deal, and so then it erases the differences between these two characters, and so obviously she's not going to have an issue with him having murdered people, because murder is also a casual hobby that she keeps for herself. While having dinner, there's a call from the potential fiancé named Richard Rockhurst, and he is appearing via phone call or video phone call. You know that he's going to be a jerk just by that name alone. He came because her father had sent him the memo about where she was, and he was in the area, so he's going to stop by and pick her up. All of the arrangements have been made for her to be picked up. All of the arrangements have been made, and these guys are worried about being tattled on that they had put her in the same cage as Locke. Now, if they were worried about being tattled on to the royal family, or perhaps other royal families like the one she was going to be married into, why would they put her in the same cage as Locke to begin with? That just reeks of not forward planning. So no wonder this guy doesn't have a real job. When she's left in the captain's quarters all alone without even a guard or an escort, everybody else is preparing for her fiancé to dock on the ship. She unlocks the panel by using a default security code for the brand of ship that they have, which is her family's brand, and obviously that works because they never changed from the default code. She had tried to warn them that Rockhurst was going to wipe them all out dead if they let him dock, They didn't listen, so once they dock, they start clearing out all of the mercs. She returns to her cell to ask Locke to help her escape and to pay him if he does. Where's she getting the money from if she's being cut off? Well, apparently when she ran off, she also transferred a bunch of money to side accounts that her family cannot track. She is also talking about how grateful she is to have learned how to shoot as a kid during her unconventional childhood. Locke takes some guns and knives from her and runs off, telling her to stay here. He's probably going to go and clear out other people and go nuts. Why she was worried about Rockhurst and not this guy, though obviously this guy is on her side to let her out. For a bit, she worries that he's left her behind and that she is just going to have to go home with Rockhurst, but no worries. She is kind of sketched out by him killing someone down the way, but it's like, were you not just carrying guns? You've acted like killing people is nothing at this point, and now all of a sudden you care. Again, it's another issue where you can't really assign weight unless you show a difference happening in the mindset. So if she's casually thinking of killing people as revenge, then later in the exact same scenario where she hasn't really gone through any sort of change that justifies why she may be sketched out. But then you might be saying, well, she was obviously being sarcastic. Like when you're mad at somebody, you're like, I could just kill them. Okay, but you need to make it more clear that that is where it is coming from. Later, when she kills people, it doesn't seem to be a big deal. So it just reads like bad writing. At that point, it is now escape time. Eventually, she is left behind again by Locke while he is doing something and found by Richard's guys. She's hurt her leg badly enough that she stumbles while walking, but when the time comes and her only move is running, she's able to do it without fail and the pain is magically gone. As she runs, she thinks about how good she's been at running and how much it helped her since she's running away. After bamming or, shooting stuff around, she runs into Locke's back and he is like, and he's all dressed like a merc now. So between all of the ruckus he was doing, he apparently also found time to change clothes. They get into an escape pod, and she thinks about how she knows how to fly one of these, but not in this tricky situation. She asks Locke if he can, and he says that he's good with his hands, and she's immediately thinking saucy thoughts, so saucy that you could bottle them up and sell them on an e-store. She reminds herself that he's a killer, probably a bad person, but that doesn't stop the sauce. I mean, it just makes the sauce thicker, if you know what I mean. Quote, heat flushed through me as I imagined those big hands on my body. Criminal, I reminded myself. Killer. He's almost left me behind. But he didn't. An internal voice whispered. It sounded a lot like my neglected libido. 2 years on the run didn't leave me much time for fun. While casual hookups were common in the consortium, at least then you knew what you were getting. And you'd probably known the person for years. Hooking up for a one-night stand with a stranger wasn't usually my style, but looking at Locke, I might be willing to make an exception. So this is also something that's going to irritate me because later she says she fell in love with somebody when she was 17 and then he went and had relations with some other girl. And she said that relationship at 17 broke her heart so bad that she stopped believing in love. And so now all of a sudden, since we don't have that context and we're at the beginning of the book, kind of like it forgets what it was doing, now she is like, well, I guess I could have a one-night stand with this guy because sex isn't that important. But we're going to be reminded a couple of times that she doesn't have rules like normal people because she is a royal, and royals can't just sleep around. Eventually, they do escape, and she's worried because she's alone in a spaceship with this big man murderer. But, whatever. It's just saucy thoughts. On the new ship, he changes clothes, going back to black and all camo and looking dangerous. He says that it's her turn, and she can't stop oogling him. Quote, Locke crowded into my personal space, but I steel my spine and refuse to give ground. His slow smile did all sorts of terrible things to me. I know your name, Ada, he murmured. It was the first time that he'd said my name without a derisive, mocking lilt, and it was far more devastating than I'd imagined. She finds men's clothes for herself, takes a shower, and gets dressed. As they're settling in, she keeps challenging him, and he goes, quote, do you know, he said conversationally, that you're the first person in a very long time willing to stand toe-to-toe with me without flinching or breaking down? Even the mercs had more sense. It makes me want to see how far I can push you before you break. Of course, she is the only one to stand up to him. No tact, and he wants to break her. Again, with that That trope. She doesn't fold at any of his attempts to intimidatingly flirt with her, and he's like, I've never met a girl like you before, a girl who ain't scared of me. And she's like, you ain't met my sisters. And he's like, nah, fam, you're different. And we gotta compare all women at all times so that I can tell that you are better than other women at all times. Then he lifts her on to an upper cot, makes her hot, but they said goodnight, so she sleeps with a knife clutched like a teddy bear, waiting for him to attack her, and startles when he approaches her later. She's admiring his eyes, which look like implants, but a different kind of implant than the ones that she knows. They don't always glow. Those are actually just genetically altered eyes, we'll find out. She's now thinking about how she wants a quiet place to retire, and then she could turn lock-in for a bunch of money to go and retire, even though she just said that she had a bunch of money set aside in other accounts. She reads his mind and assumes that he's also thinking of double-crossing her. So I guess that we now have a new drive. Turn him in and retire before he does it to you. Though, since he's wanted, he might want to negotiate his name is cleared if possible. That would mean that her dad would have to have military connections as well, which if he is a king of sorts or a royalty of sorts, then you would think that he in fact does have a way to do that, and we will later learn that he can clear the name because Ada is going to argue that all of their records are clear. They're looking at their first planet to land on, a seedy mining planet, since all of the miners have left. Miners as in pickaxe, not miners as in children. They crash land on this place, put their clothes on because it is insanely cold, and waste no time getting going. They work through the cold, get to a random abandoned cabin that somehow has power, though it is a weaker heater, one bed, and he is now this caring boyfriend already. They cuddle through the night to keep each other warm. She wakes up and he's not there, but he comes back quickly because he's gotten them a couple of comms. She quickly attaches her fake identity to it, the fake identity which uses her real middle name, almost as big brain as Dalen's, using Dalen's first name. She catches up with her siblings on this unsecure line to see what's going on. Thinks about how she doesn't have any money for a new ship, and then she and Locke start off to steal her comm and get some money. So the comm that she has isn't good enough. She has a different comm that she wants to get. They reach this unnamed city. A couple of mercs threaten a shakedown. Locke takes them down, no problem. Ada's like, you shouldn't have done that, and Locke just shrugs, because of course he's just too cool to worry about it. She goes to the comm store, and the woman is clocked as stingy and watchful, but then brightens up as soon as she sees that Ada's actually a woman. Women get discounts here for some reason. She haggles with the woman selling the comm that if the woman unlocks it, then she gets her max price, but if she can't, then she gets the minimum price. Naturally, the woman can't unlock it, so Ada gets the comm for nearly free, then buys a bunch of other random stuff, clothing and jewelry pieces that also belong to her. I don't know how all of a sudden just randomly Ada happened upon a store that had a bunch of her things in it specifically, but she's really just buying back her own stuff that she just so happened to find in the first store that she walked into on this random mining planet. It makes you wonder if this is where she had initially been captured by the other guys, and if how she knew this is where they had sold all of her belongings to. It doesn't really come up. It's just kind of a convenience that just happens. And while I can accept conveniences in various places at various times, because sometimes in real life conveniences do happen, this is just too convenient. When this planet wasn't even one where she mentioned, oh yeah, this is where I was beforehand, where I'm pretty sure, or where I heard these guys sold my stuff. Also, why would the mercs sell her stuff when they are returning her for a bounty? Because the king might be like, why did you sell my daughter's things? You can do serendipity and get away with it in fiction to a certain extent, but this just didn't work for me. Despite getting a huge major discount and haggling for a huge major discount, she leaves the woman a tip, making it so that money really doesn't matter here either. Because if she was trying to save money because she didn't have money for a ship, well, turns out she can still massively tip, and the whole fighting to get a lower price was pointless. They find cover somewhere else, and for some reason take off their jackets even though it is freezing outside. She gets into this device that she brought, which has a quirk. Quote, designed for spying, the chip also worked great for staying a step ahead of father's trackers. Purchase a new identity with untraceable funds and voila, a clean break. The trackers would eventually find the new identities, but it took time and gave me a chance to escape. The comm unlocked. Some sneaky bastard had stolen the comm from my abandoned room on the station, realized that it was locked beyond hope, and sold it just in time for me to buy it. And here I thought the universe didn't love me. Granted, this was the second closest planet to the station and the shadier of the two, but I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Not only was this a top-of-the-line communication device, it was also designed especially for von Hassenberg family members, though you could be hard-pressed to notice that based on the design. It had a few extra features, too. How exactly is it made for the family? We don't really know, but it also sounds pretty sketchy, honestly. Backdoors for the company who made it to get in are meant to be there so that they can spy on you through your phone whenever they want. Not to mention, her father has trackers in every single one of these phones. She thinks that she can avoid the trackers. Quote, I set the comm to run a self-diagnostic, and when it came back clean, I turned on the scanning mode. Designed to secure a space for communication, this mode would find any trackers or bugs the fence had managed to attach to us. Most comms had some form of bug sweeping functionality, but this one was much more sensitive than the standard. So they're all programmed with bugs in them, but also all have bug scanning technology within them, which defeats the purpose of putting bugs on them, unless you just have the bug scanning stuff on there as secret, which I guess you probably do, so that people don't know that you also have bugs on there. And so then, if any of the Van Hassenberg family gets their hands on it, then they can disable the bugs, while everybody else just gets to deal with the bugs. This family is already just sounding insanely dubious. They're a crime family, and Ada is a part of it. Quote, the card and shirt came back clean, much to my surprise. Our cloaks were a different matter. Each had a tiny tracker attached. I used my comm to connect to the tracker and reconfigure them. Whoever was monitoring the trackers just saw them go offline. I, however, could now see their locations overlaid on the map. It wasn't a standard comm feature, but it proved useful enough that the von Hassenberg family comms always came equipped with it. I'm still not sure how she knew that it was one of her family's special comms, unless it was her old comm indeed that she had found in this thrift shop, which would have been super luck because not only was it on the planet, but she went to the right town on the correct planet, and the right shop on the right town first try. Maybe if she had heard people on the ship talking about how and where they had sold her belongings, then you could have specifically done that, and then she could have been like, oh, heck yes, I got here fast enough. But that's not what happened. As she walks around, she finds a man that she knows named Richard, and he's talking into his phone about how they need to find Ada. She passes him close enough to touch him. I don't know why you'd want that kind of attention. She's got no bugs, though, and watches him over their shoulder. She says, quote, it was clear that they'd arrived after us, but not by much if Locke left the house while I was scanning for bugs. Maybe Locke had drawn off the main sea of men, leaving behind a skeleton crew to watch what they thought was Locke's contact's house. If so, we'd gotten extremely lucky. Luck was a fickle bitch, though, and I'd used up my monthly allotment in the last 2 days. I needed to be more careful. So maybe don't rub up against Richard when you don't have to. She returns to the house now paranoid, thinking, oh shoot, they might be here with the entire team and I'm coming in with only a knife. We both stupid and we're gonna see which stupid wins that fight. She doesn't find any mercs inside of her house, but Locke is in there in the dark. He was shot by someone. They're dead, though. She fixes him up, mentions that she saw dudes working for Richard, and there is no loyalty between them. Then, she's thinking that she needs to contact her siblings for important information. She says she can trust them with anything because they do anything for her. Why? What makes them so strong against their parents and united, but still with their parents? She's going to call Bianca, one of her older sisters, who is still suffering from losing her husband. Suffering is a nice word because she is actually happy that she killed her husband. You'll find out that later. In calling her sister, she has to verify, and her verification phrase is her name and that she is smarter than everyone else in her family. Once the call is sent out to get a message back, she is asked about beds in this place, and you get this certified Peripatina moment. Quote, Locke looked up from his calm with a lascivious grin. Afraid not, but don't worry, I don't mind sharing. Sharing a bed with Marcus Locke when I wasn't near death was a recipe for disaster. Hot, sweaty, naked disaster. Heat spread across my face and lower. Definitely lower. Lord, help me. She tries to walk away. He stops her. She asks for a judgment-free zone. He says, this isn't Planet Fitness, and so she makes him hug her so that she can cry and feel fake intimacy for a little bit. Quote, as we got older, hugs were often replaced by cheek kisses and handshakes, but they were busted out in cases of extra stress and emotional turmoil. I'd say this week counted. Sometimes a simple sign of affection was more powerful than a whole host of words. Even the illusions of affections from a man I barely trusted was enough to ease my heart. He kisses her, puts an end to it, calls it idiotic and that she needs to go to bed. She's mad that he called her stupid, but I don't know, maybe see who's stupid wins this time around. She notates that he's hurt, telling him to go to bed, and he says, quote, his gaze was scorching. If I get into bed right now, there's only one thing that I'm going to be doing, and it's not sleeping. My nipples pebbled under my shirt as renewed lust blazed through my system. Okay, maybe it wasn't the kissing that he thought was dumb. He says no, he's not going to bed, and leaves so that he can scout the perimeter instead. She collapses onto the bed, thinking about how dangerous Locke is in more than one way. Her nipples pebble yet again, and for both their sakes, she is going to sleep fully clothed, because otherwise... danger. It's not like they've been freezing this whole time anyway, with no heater, where it wouldn't make sense to take off all of your clothes unless you're going to use each other's body heats, I guess. She wakes up alone, gets dressed, and then harasses Locke about not buying shampoo yesterday when they were out walking around Criminal City. Quote, did you buy soap or shampoo yesterday? That would solve one problem. Locke looked at me like I was crazy. Okay then, I guess I was the only one who cared that my shower involved actual cleansers. I'm going out. I need shampoo, even if you don't, and laundry detergent, and food. Dressed in her girly clothes, she's sure that no one would bother her, but Locke tells her that she will be bothered if she isn't protected by the bad lads of this planet, so she should give up on the soap and become a neat. She finally agrees that she won't go out dressed like a girl and puts on her other clothings, but she worries about Bianca's earlier warning. Bianca warned her that bad things were going to come when, they were messaging each other. She changes into her boy clothes in front of Locke. Frustrated, she starts practicing weaponless, single-person karate when Locke asks her to spar her randomly. They fight each other and she wants to kiss him. They break, go out looking for guns, get chased down by some badmen, pretend that she is trying to get away from Locke so that she can actually get away while Locke fights the baddies, and then Locke is captured and left behind. While hiding, she uses her tracker to find where Locke is, and she thinks that he might have been captured, but she hopes that it's just betrayal so that she doesn't have to rescue him. Yeah, so she ends up tracking Locke, Richard, and the enormous balls in the situation. She can't do anything about it yet. Needs more information. Needs equipment to get into this, the warehouse where they are keeping him. Fortunately, she gets a message from the shop owner, Veronica, who calls her to meet. Veronica's the one that she bought all of her stuff back from. Veronica invites her to a tea shop where they can talk about things. Once they get inside, there's a minor diatribe about working as a waitress and how they don't get tipped enough, so she makes sure to tip extra well. Then they get to talking about business, and she has to make herself the baddest of them all. Quote, I picked up one of the delicate triangle tea sandwiches and was transported back to my mother's afternoon tea parties. The women of the consortium were just as bloodthirsty and power-hungry as the men, perhaps more so, and entering a lady's tea always struck me as entering a nest of pretty vipers. Veronica agrees to help if she can be taken off this planet because she's finding it hard to get anybody to help her. No one will take her because her non-husband, the man she is running away from, is scary. Ada agrees, and this gets her the information that she needs about the warehouse that Locke is being kept at. Skulking around the detention center, holding her current favorite fugitive, she's stopped by a couple of drunk jerks and fights them. She slips away to cry about killing people, quote, "I poured the pain out one tear at a time until I was emptied inside. Then I dried my eyes and pieced myself back together." She walks away to think about what she needs to do to infiltrate and sleeps. She decrypts the file that she'd been sent by Bianca using their shared key. Quote, "I decrypted the files that she sent with her personal shared key. Pegasaurus. It was a magical creature that we'd made up as children, a cross between a dinosaur and a Pegasus. It looked like a winged, scaly horse with an extra long neck and extra sharp teeth." After setting up to steal an air vehicle, she also locates Locke. He looks to be in bad shape, but she hopes that he looks worse than he is. Then it's time to get strapped. Once she's prepped, she goes. She also is impressed about how much money and resources Veronica seems to have. Almost impressive how she hasn't been able to get off the planet yet with all of her resources. During this stealing of the ship, Locke is given this drug called Foxy, which makes him stronger, but it also makes him horny. It's only the street versions of Foxy that make him horny. There are military versions that dampen the side effect of horniness, but the street versions make you froth. So, of course, he's got the frothing roofie that makes you stronger. During the taking of the ship, he gets all up in Ada's space and she tries to fight it. Though all he does is push her against a wall and put a thigh between hers, that's enough to make her moan. So who is on the drugs here exactly? Because she is, rowing. Quote, "Not that kind of help, though. Trust me, if you weren't high as hell, I'd consider it. A neglected libido could only be suppressed for so long, and I'd passed that point of no return 3 kisses ago." I struggled to keep my thoughts on target. I pushed against his chest. They do disarm everyone and get the ship and save Locke, though there are extra baddies on it, and Ada thinks that Veronica is up to something. Turns out that Veronica was hiding a child all along. Ada plans to talk to her about that later, but first they need to get out of here. She looks at the logistics of leaving, how fast they might leave, etc., and finds that they might be sitting ducks either way. Then they receive a call from Richard, the possible fiancé, trying to convince her to stop running. What they did do was steal Richard's ship. She doesn't know what their marriage would actually do for the war since they're so low down, but considering how convincing her dad is, how has she not been informed of her value as a piece in all of this? Not only that, but the war is entirely dependent on making this treaty with Richard Rockhurst, because he tells her that if she doesn't come back and marry, there's going to be a war. So, but I don't understand how she went through all of this training with all of these rules of how she's going to need to operate as the child of a noble, and she doesn't know that if she doesn't marry, there is going to be war, that she doesn't understand what her value is in this, and what's at risk by her running, though later she uses that as a piece to manipulate people with, so then she actually does. So then this ends up looking like something that was not revised in the story. Now, that's something to always pay attention to, and something that at least stands out to me when I'm reading and makes me feel like I'm reading a first draft or a barely edited or revised first draft, is if there are things that the character would intrinsically know. Now, there are things where characters can either be wrong about what they think is the truth, or they might have a misconception, or they might learn something as they go along. In the case of this, where she was running away because she was groomed to marry in general, for the betterment of her family name, then she would have some recollection of what her family would be using her for, especially because it is for the family that she is getting married. Now, there's a difference if they try to keep everything in the family so that you don't know that you are being a piece that is used, but if you are raised as a spy, then you would kind of know what is at risk because you are playing a political role. It is a political marriage that you are a part of. So this becomes a thing where you need to understand what is part of the character's training. Not only are you being given a gun, not only are you being given physical training, not only are you being given behavioral training so that you can act a certain way and be a spy, but your marriage is entirely a sham because you are working for the family. So that should be something that she is aware of and all of her siblings are aware of what is at risk. And then it asks you what she feels for her countrymen, because this entire thing is either for basically her family's corporation, if it is a corporation that runs her kingdom, or it is for her people. And so does she care about her people, and what kind of sacrifices is she willing to make for her people? And if these questions are not answered, then it lacks culture. Not only that, but then it looks like a first draft that was never fully developed, when some of these questions should be known and she should have at least an idea, even if it's a lie. That would be the difference, is if she was given a lie by her parents of what would be affected, and then she could later learn new information of what is actually at risk, which could have even been Richard being like, we're going to go to war if you don't marry. And then she's like, oh, shoot. But she already knows that. So then, and she uses that against them. So, and Richard isn't even careful about not saying it being war. He goes, look, I'm going to either go to war or you're going to give me what I would get by marrying you anyway. Now, I can see her family not wanting to do that because the whole point of marriage is so that he could spy on their family. And Richard just wants the power of it all. He wants the property, the power. But again, we also, another thing that we don't have is we don't know who is higher up in this scenario. Is it Ada's family who is higher up, or is it Richard's family? Who is the one marrying down politically? Also, quote, Richard's expressions closed. Ah, something about that was important. What did he stand to gain from our marriage? He would gain the contents of my dowry, but I didn't know what all that entailed or how it would prevent war. I made a mental note to look into it. So that really doesn't make sense. She may not know everything that belongs to her dowry, but she would know what part she needed to play, especially if it was for the good of her family. Because the thing is, if her family is not loyal to whatever ties that they have through marriage, then they are going to be loyal to their family, and they are going to want to pass whatever they get down through their family, because it is going to be either their family or their kingdom. And then those who are in the family, one of them is eventually going to have to take over, or they are a dynasty and they work together. But this shows that the parents do not run it as a dynasty, because all of the kids hate the parents and the parents work against the kids, but the kids also all work together. So none of it really makes any sense. It is just kind of a generic family drama where people aren't even, oh, I'm going to take this from you so I can run it better. When her existence is tied to a dowry that is for power, I find it hard to imagine that her family did not inform her of what would be given and what would be expected in her role, when it is a role of manipulation and spyhood. Anyway, marriage is the only way out of war, but neither of them can explain why, showing a lack of world building and understanding in the politics of this particular situation. Quote, I will tell you the same thing I told my father. I will not be forced into marriage. He did not believe me. He thought that I would bow to his wishes if he applied enough pressure. He was wrong. I suggest that you learn from his mistake. You would rather send your house to war than to marry me? We were friends once. Richard seemed genuinely hurt. I refuse to believe that the only two solutions are our marriage or war. I do not understand why our marriage is so important, and until I do, I will not be marrying you. If you would clarify, perhaps I could help you find another solution. There is no clarification. It is just a forced, you need to marry me or else I'm going to declare war. Because this book doesn't really understand the politics of the situation, and it doesn't even try. He's just kind of a forced villain. When she hangs up, Locke is listening to the whole thing and growling about marrying someone for obvious forced reasons. Quote, will you marry him? Locke growled. I spun around, Locke still lounging in a chair where I had left him, but he was clearly awake and more alert than he had been. How much had he heard? Enough to know that Richard wanted to marry. Would I? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I mean, it's not even a threat that it's going to happen. She was aggressive on the phone. I sighed. I don't know. I do care about our people. If it really would prevent a war, I would have to trade my happiness for theirs? What's one person's compared to the verse, huh? The words were more bitter than I had anticipated. You know it won't be that easy. I know. That's why I'm still running. I'll run until I can't. Then I'll either stand and fight or I'll resign myself to my fate. I shook off the bitterness and refocused. For now, I have to get us moving before Richard decides to blow us up for the fun of it. So number one, he's not going to blow you up for the fun of it when he is literally trying to capture you so that he can marry you to prevent war and or to get his poontang war tasty time. What I dislike the most about this, though, is that it wants to pretend that she's thinking about self-sacrifice for the points of it, but in all honesty, it is not even on her radar. But she has to make a statement of, what's my happiness in the grand scheme of things, huh? However, when she was literally just talking to Richard, she said, I don't freaking care if it's war. Her mood between these two is totally different in a way that doesn't work. Locke and Ada then retire to the medbay to check on his wounds and to mildly flirt. When she tries to not look at his monster, she also asks him to take off his clothes so that she can work on healing him up. Quote, the shirt I can do. He pulled the tattered shirt off over his head with a grunt. Even his killer abs couldn't distract from the extensive dark purple bruising that covered most of his torso. She mentions paying him as little attention as possible so that he can leave before it gets more dangerous, calls herself expendable, which offends him, and she's like, oh no. Quote, I swallowed, nodded. I had treated him too familiarly. Somewhere along the way I had started to see the man and forgotten about the devil. I wish sometimes they weren't just so innocent. Like, Marcella is sheltered, my Marcella, but she understands straightforward statements of interest. Anyway, Ada leaves quickly before things can get too saucy, though he tells her not to hide from him. Eventually, they land on another planet called Sedition, a city where one of her dummy corporations is. Would her family not be looking for her there? She renames the ship Polaris to hide it. She scouts around the ship once she's done and then returns to her room where Locke is, laying on her bed in his underwear, because that's what you do before you're in a relationship, you know, when you're seducing and don't have that relationship yet. She's like, ugh, I can't kick him out of my bed in his panties. He's injured. Can we just, like, actually have people react to things for once and have them have to work with it? Maybe. Obviously, Locke says that he's come to sleep with her. That's it. Just sleeping. Unless you want to do some other things. But otherwise, it's just sleeping. But otherwise, it's other things. She doesn't even bother to resist and actually strips into her underwear while saying, no funny business, bro. Just sleep in your clothes or on the floor if you really don't want something to happen. You don't have to be like, well, you did just flirt with me, but you also said nothing unless nothing. You don't have to strip. Okay, if you're that uncomfortable, you do not have to strip. He's also a criminal. Like, don't act like you should trust him. Do not lay with him. Do not assume that he will not bite you. Do not assume that he does not have rabies. You got to make this believable. It doesn't work when you're supposed to be sussy of him and then to strip down like it. It's like you leaning over to bend to fold clothing and then you say you're stuck in the dryer, but you're nowhere freaking near the dryer. She wakes up alongside Locke, him holding her, and immediately she tells us how she has had to be careful sleeping with men. Quote, I stiffened. I could count on one hand the number of times that I'd woken up with a man. As a daughter of a high house, I had to be careful, both because I was completely defenseless during sex and because many men thought that they could use my body to win my heart and therefore my name. My hookups had been with men that I trusted, but even then it wasn't usually a stay-the-night kind of event. And this is a very obvious example of the author lying and undermining their own character. If Ada had to be careful around men, then she wouldn't have laid with Locke, and she wouldn't have gotten into her panties with this stranger. She would have been more cautious in the cell with him. Instead, she made herself defenseless both times when she didn't have to, and she could have at least considered the stealth to be a strategic show that she was trying to build trust with him when neither of them owed each other anything. But none of her actions toward him have expressed that she had to be cautious with men at any given time, or that she was afraid of men trying to use her for her name. This is something something that you, the writer, need to consider about your character's actions and the motivations behind them and how they influence every decision they make throughout. The circumstances that influence the way that they move throughout. And that's not to say you can't change things based on circumstances and show that change. There is a scene in Bodymore 1, like the very first scene. So not a spoiler. There's a scene in Bodymore 1 where Joey sees a dead body and she immediately vomits because that's the experience she has. In book 2, she is in a completely different mindset, if you know what I mean, and has a completely different response. Then in book 3, she's in a completely different mindset, if you know what I mean, and she has a different response. So you can do the same situation and have changing scenarios, but this is presenting as if she has always had to be cautious, but she has not been cautious once with any of the men that she has been around. You can also have your characters act irrationally, but they should still act within their own logical framework unless they are lying, in which case this is straight lying to the reader since it is in the narrative and it is not the character or the actions. Of course, Locke immediately starts touching her when she wakes up, quote, "I huffed in annoyance and he chuckled. Did you want something? I wanted his hands on my breasts, his mouth on my nip-nops. I wanted him inside of me. The sheer force of my desire shocked me. I took a deep breath and reined in my wayward body. Bad girl. I want many things," I said honestly, "but I should get up." She plans to go to the bank and update her sister today on what all is going on and to try to get ahead of Richard since she has been out for 11 hours apparently. She keeps looking at Locke's glorious body and his impressive erection, and she's staring at it long enough that he's like, "Bruh, keep doing that and I might show you how to smoke some sausage and blow a cigar if you know." After leaving the bedroom, Ada goes to the dining area that has a food synthesizer and a fridge/oven. We have to ask constructively, why though? What is the purpose of both? Do the plebeians on board have to get synthesized food while the kings get the real food? What's the functional purpose of having both on a spaceship? Maybe having both in a house would make sense, but a spaceship is a travel item. And so if you could just synthesize food, then that means that you can save on space. It means that you can save money because this thing just makes food out of nothing and it's never going to go bad. Unless you are on a luxury ship, then you might have food if real food is considered more luxury than synthesized food. We then get to see Ada visiting the sparring room where Veronica is to see what she owes. But Veronica says that she owes nothing because she has helped her, so there are no worries about it. As they go out, he compliments her on wearing blue and then says that he'll be playing her bodyguard today. That's Locke saying he'll play the bodyguard. She asks what to call him, saying that she's going to go by Irene so that no one knows who she is, keeping suspicions low. Using her middle name is not going to get anybody's suspicion, that's right. She's going to call him by his first name, Marcus, and absolute genius move to have a secret identity. Dalen would know. Traveling the city is described as poor people live in the sky and richer people live on the ground, and you get fined for throwing water from the top. Quote, "The transport settled onto a wide tree-lined avenue. Men and women in expensive clothes strolled sedately along the shops. If you wanted to see or be seen, which was a little tricky for someone who wanted to remain anonymous. Luckily, I wasn't the first person reluctant to show my face on the street full of wolves." Why are these books always like this, where it's pathological to find everything in the surroundings as the opposite of the main character, just to show how they defy everything? Every character, every scenario is defined specifically as the opposite of what's best for the main character. The main character can't make good decisions for themselves, not even to avoid situations they don't want to be in by like going through the alleyways. They have to always go in the worst possible scenario for themselves to then show that they get through it flawlessly. And while I get the attempt to put rich people closer to the ground on a bandit city/town, this also means that everyone knows that you're loaded if you're on the ground floor, and that ground floors are easier to rob than upper floors. You're also more likely to experience noise pollution, foot traffic, and garbage. So this needed more development to define why the lower levels were considered better. They get to the bank and she beelines for the VIP lounge, knowing that she doesn't look like she belongs there and intimidates the doorman to get inside. So much for not trying to pull attention to herself. She's a threat. I mean, come on. She bosses the guy around until she gets someone else to deal with her and quote, "Sometimes playing a bitch was awesome." After getting a private room with the bank teller, she thinks about all of the accounts that she has with money in them, but getting money out of those would alert her father. Why is it even coming up then? Just to tell us how rich she is? We already know. She wouldn't even consider those accounts if they were going to get her in trouble, so what are we doing here? Also, if she wanted to blend in, maybe don't use the VIP bank lounge and throw a fit in it. She gets everything that she wants from the junior that she was pushing around with her bossy bitch attitude, and she basically describes having a bunch of Bitcoin wallets, and that's what she uses to withdraw money from. Just tell me if this makes sense to you. Quote, numbered accounts did not keep transaction records. Oh, they kept the running balance and showed when money was being added or removed, but they kept no records of where the money came from or where it went to. Because anonymous money transfers were so ripe for abuse, opening a numbered account required a house ID. You didn't have to give the banker your name or let them scan your ID chip, but if you couldn't produce a house seal, then you couldn't open an account. The lack of transactional records meant that when these credit chips were used, the money couldn't be tied back to the numbered account. So I could transfer the money from credit chip to Irene's account without compromising the secrecy of the number account. It was the same way that I got money into the numbered account in the first place. After getting money and leaving, she's going to go and buy some clothes. Locke wants some too. Quote, the thought of Marcus Locke in a suit derailed my thought process for a solid minute. All of that muscle and menace hidden beneath my bespoke suit would be a sight to see. Yum. Unironically. He says that he is coming with her wherever she goes, and she pays him, saying that this is their last day together, and he doesn't disagree, which makes Ada sad because she wanted to be told that she was wrong. The next chapter starts with her saying that she is sad because they won't be together forever, while Locke says that he is going to be there until they take Richard down, and he can't wait to clap Richard's cheeks. She buys 2 cloaks. The first one is cream, and she says that it is impractical, though she can use it for its actual purpose. It's just going to get dirty easier, and because of that, she is also going to get a blue one, which is much more practical. Shopping then for pants and a shirt, this bit feels a bit personal. Quote, Locke wandered off to the men's section while I dug through the women's options. I found a few shirts in my size and various sleeve length, the pants I needed to actually try on because it was difficult to find something that fit without sagging. I grabbed a few pairs and headed for the dressing room. After a frustrating 10 minutes, I found 1 pair of pants that weren't horrible. I went back to see if they had more in that style, and of course, they didn't. So I settled for what I had and went to find Marcus. After clothing shopping, they go on a dangerous part of town to the black market to get arms. I thought they had gotten arms at the last planet since she had gotten strapped to go and save Marcus from Richard, but we need the arms dealer now. Good to know that the arms dealer is not only insanely wealthy, but good friends with Ada and also super hot. Quote, but where Locke was roughly attractive, Reese was perfectly classically handsome, a statue of an ancient god brought to life. Him and Locke are also the same age, mid to late 20s. There's this weird thing in this entire scene where it acts like Reese and Ada both don't know each other and are also familiar with each other. The 2 men threaten each other to have Ada dismiss them both to calm down. Bizarrely, the dude also has to say that he's not interested in their bounties because he is rich now, but the guy is a black market arms dealer, okay? Why would he even consider bringing the cops around when his entire market is outlaws and, illegal guns? To continue with this BS of talking out both sides of your mouth, Reese is hitting on Ada hard in front of Locke, making him mad, offering her dinner alone, just the 2 of them, and she says yes, but only if she can bring a guest, right after saying that he wanted her alone. She also says that I have ugly clothes, so you're going to have to accept eating with me in ugly clothes, and he's like, baby, you are so hot no matter what you're wearing, it's totally fine. They keep measuring dicks with Reese hitting on her, and Ada is holding Locke's arm to keep him from punching the bitch out of Reese. And thinking about how she wonders if she can just leave the boys alone to dine and then she can go and do her own McDonald's thing by herself because this is so much drama she doesn't want to deal with. Though she could just, tell them to stop. She knows exactly what she is doing, but is also just rolling her eyes in annoyance as she leads them both on and goes, wow, I can't believe that I got out of there without any bloodshed on me between these 2 horny boys. Locke's jealous as they're walking back to the ship and badgers her about her past relationship with Reese, who he had been, what he had offered her originally, which she explains was He said when she initially ran away from her home, he was willing to give her a house, a normal life if she wanted to live there at no charge. He wasn't going to expect anything from her, but she said she couldn't do it. Why? It was everything she wanted. She didn't have a reason not to do it. Then she asks Locke how he knows things. Also, this scene is more weird when you realize that both Reese and Locke know each other because they were in the same military unit, and Reese will later defend Locke as having been the reason why he got to survive when their military unit went under. But yet they're in this scene fighting each other with this dick measuring contest as if they don't know each other, as if they are blinded by each other. Again, a lack of revision in a draft. This is why I hate when people are like, I'm just going to edit in place as I go forward, because this stuff gets through. After finishing with Locke, she goes to visit Veronica and asks who she is running from. It turns out that Veronica was with the first son of the Yamada family, which is one of the 3 most powerful houses in the universe. So you have Ada, who is from the von Hassenberg family, you have Richard, who is from the Rockhurst family, and then you have the Yamada family. And Veronica was seeing unofficially the first son of the Yamada family. The Yamada family son is brutal, and quote, I half expected it, but the confirmation landed like a punch in the gut. Hitoshi was the eldest Yamada heir. Hitoshi was the eldest Yamada heir, and if I was honest, the most likely to keep a woman hidden on a backwater planet. Hitoshi was so sweet at first, Veronica continued. It was perfect, and naturally I was thrilled to have caught his attention. But once it became clear that I was pregnant and going to keep the baby, he went insane. How did he get you to TSD-9? I asked. He kidnapped me from my apartment. My parents had kicked me out when they had found out that I was pregnant. We were well off, and I had been saving my allowance in a private account. It's all that I had. Hitoshi dumped me on TSD-9, and since House Yamada controlled it, it's prohibited anyone from removing me from the planet of pain of death. So, number 1, why would her family be mad at her? They were going to move up in society by marrying somebody, by having a child who would be a royal child. They should be like, oh my gosh, hell yes. Number 2, why would they just strand her, Yamada? Why would they just strand her on this island or on this planet instead of just killing her? Like, yeah, it would totally make more sense to threaten an entire planet to not move her than it would be to just kill her. It doesn't make any sense. Like, from an actual... Take it out of the melodramatic garbage trying to sustain a plot for 300 pages. What is the logic behind Yamada doing that? There is none. It is all just author fingers wagging the dolls around. And then he pays her child support on top of that. It seems like the worst raw deal that there is. She says that her nanny helped her set up, and Hitoshi can follow her wherever she goes unless she buries the trail well. She asks to stay with Ada to be on the move on the regular, and Ada is like, oh well, what's another super powerful house following after me? Teehee, let's just get all 3. Then we've got like a hole-in-one kind of situation going on. Ada tells Reese that someone else is coming along for dinner and then continues toward the kitchen because she is hungry. Quote, damn it, I gave him a shallow nod of acknowledgement and then made my way to the food synth. I didn't feel up to cooking for real, even if we did have the ingredients. Like, who would? If the synthesized food is just as good as the other food, why bother? She makes a grilled cheese sandwich, fries, and iced coffee, her comfort food, and then sits with Locke, where she lectures him now about how he behaved, and he admits to being jealous, and she's giddy about it. Quote, and if he got to be jealous, then I ought to be able to stake a claim as well. They start making out, her nipples pebble, and it is very awkwardly written. Quote, he made a rumbling sound and dragged me closer with a hand on my hip and one buried in my hair. I slid forward until I was clutched against him, straddling his strong thigh. My breast rubbed against the muscles of his chest, and I moaned low. His tongue thrust into my mouth, and I welcomed the invasion. Locke's hands clenched, and he pulled me closer, molding our bodies together. I rocked against him, mindless with pleasure. He pulled back and I chased him, pressing kisses against his lips and jaw. I ran my hand over his head, relishing the scrap of barely there stubble against my palm. He groaned, and the hand on my hip slid up to cup my breasts. I hissed out a breath, and then his thumb brushed over my pebbled nipples, my river of Bristos. He reclaimed my mouth at the same time as he rolled my nipple between his fingers and thumb. Pleasure lanced through me, and I arched into him. They're interrupted as Lynn, who is Veronica's kid, comes in, and then Veronica follows after. Veronica grins, giving them this meaningful look, saying that she knew that they were getting sexy, and she still was letting her child run in there anyway. Lord knows what he may have seen. Later, after setting the course for their ship, it's time for dinner with Rhys. She's immediately thirsting over him, looking at his great suit and living in the mansion in the suburbs. Veronica tells Rhys about her plight, and he says he doesn't throw women and children to the wolves, so she shows off her beautiful made-up face and asks for help. Quote, Veronica unwrapped her scarf. Now it was Rhys's turn to look dazed. Veronica's makeup was stellar, and she looked stunning. I am running from a house, she said simply. I have asked Lady Ada to take me with her when she leaves, but she suggested I talk to you first. She thinks that I'll feel trapped by my decision to throw in with her. What do you think? So she's like this. Lady Ada says that I am going to regret my decision. After sharing her plight, Locke continues to flirt with Ada until dinner is ready. Then she pouts when it's time for dinner to come and they have to stop. He hates all of the manners. He hates everybody's upper-class manners, where he doesn't have manners, can't even chew with his mouth closed. While at dinner, Rhys throws flirties at Ada to make Locke jealous, but also starts flirting with Veronica because she's a hottie, and apparently it doesn't matter. She's still gonna go for it. After dinner, Rhys talks to Ada about how dangerous Locke is, and Ada is like, nah, it's okay. He's not like that with me. He would never hurt me. Quote, Rhys's expression turned knowing. Pretend indifference all you like, but I know you, Ada von Hansenberg. Just be careful. I don't want either of you to get hurt. And Locke guards those he thinks of as his like a dragon guards gold. We just have good chemistry, I said. He doesn't think I'm his. Just the thought made me twitchy, but underneath that, warmth tried to bloom. Damn my soft, treacherous heart. Rhys merely raised an eyebrow and stood. Let's join them before he proves you wrong, he said. Girl, y'all made out already, okay? He already said that he was jealous. You got turned on that he was jealous. Please. Joining together, Locke challenges Rhys to a duel. Accepted. The ladies say that they'll watch to tell them how stupid they are, but really it's to stare at their abs, to which Locke is more built, but only enough to comment on how much more built he is than Rhys. Locke obviously wins this battle and then collects Ada's dripping, moist body from the stands, which she has taken to the room that he plans to shower in, and all of that with, quote, if you stay in this room, we're gonna fuck, he said plainly. If that's not what you want, then you should leave now. He was asking for consent and doing it without trying to be coercive. He might not know how to escort a lady to dinner or which fork to use for salad, but at his core, he was more of a gentleman than a good chunk of the consortium. So long as I remembered it was just sex, I would be fine. My body throbbed in need, and opportunities for what I had hoped would be mind-blowing sex didn't happen every day, so I would guard my heart and have the night of fun. Tomorrow he would be gone, and I would go back to being alone. I refused to dwell on why. That made my heart ache. Can we stop with like this fake naivety? Because it's not cute. It doesn't add anything. It's just annoying. Oh no, he already kissed me and he said it's the same bullshit that was in Guns and Smoke where Jessie was like, I love you. And Bonnie was like, no, you don't. And then you get her away from Jessie and she's like, I don't even know if he cares about me. He's already made out with you. He's already risked his life for you. He's already told you that he loves you. What is this? Also, thanks for confirming that consent is not coercive. Quote, my whole body came to attention. He smelled like warm, sweaty male, but under that was the musty, metallic scent of blood. Conquering warrior or not, the blood had to go. Now in the bathroom, economically taking off clothing, and yes, it did say they were economically taking off clothing. What are your thoughts on that? She is looking at his erection and frothing in more than one way. Quote, then Locke dropped his pants, and it was my turn to ogle him. His jutting erection was an obvious clue to his state of arousal. Was it an obvious clue? But it was his smoldering stare that had me crossing the room to kiss him. Cringy sex happens, mind-blowing with stars and unleashing, as tends to happen in these books. Quote, "That was just round one, sweetheart," Locke said with a grin that threatened my guarded heart with its shield and sword. It only gets better from here. There was the parry of his dick. He proved himself right. The next chapter starts by saying between having sex with Locke, she made him get up to go and check if Veronica was ready to leave. So can you imagine, like, wait, we need to go and check on Veronica. And so then he has to get out of bed, go down the hall. You good? You ready to go? Okay. Imagine that he just walked out of the room and then pretended to talk to her and then just came back in. Nope, she's not ready yet. It's just the most ridiculous thing. Imagine stopping, sweaty, covered in juices and flushing, to go and ask somebody else if they're ready to go home yet when you're at a friend's house. Because they're still at Reese's house, mind you. They're just having a sex marathon at Reese's house post-dinner. I didn't even know they were spending the night there. Then, when she's finally done, she checks on Veronica herself, who is also covered in stubble burns, likely from being with Reese after he had been flirting with her for the heck of it. Quote, "The sex had been beyond amazing, but I'd expected Locke to be gone when I awoke. When he wasn't, Reese's warning came back to me with a vengeance. One-night stands I was comfortable with, relationships I was not. It was a lesson that I had learned the hard way. The last time she was in love was when she was 17. I don't know how old she is now. She then talks about how this first boy was the man, I should say, because he was a decade her senior, wanting to run away with him even if her parents disowned her. At 17, I had been allowed to join the adult consortium events for the first time. James has been a decade older and handsome as sin. He was from a small house of no importance, but he showered me with attention and affection, and I secretly craved it. I'd thought myself in love. My parents refused to let me see him, which only made him more tempting. He wooed me with all of the skill and cunning of an apex predator," which you would think in this case might not be great, but then you remember in like Fourth Wing and other stories where all of them make the male love interests look at their loved ones, their interests, as gazelles, and they are predators, and that is considered a good thing. "And it was only thanks to my sisters that I didn't end up pregnant. They had taken me to get birth control implant a month before my debut. No one could deter me from James, and when he asked me to marry him, it was the happiest day of my life. I accepted and broke the news to my father. Father laughed until he saw that I was serious. Then he told me that I was free to marry the bounder, but that would cut from the house if I did. I didn't care. It was true love. James had a different reaction. I told him that father would disown me if we married, but I would sacrifice my house for him. I'll never forget his sneer of his response. You are worthless to me without your name. I can't believe that I wasted months on you. Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. At the very next event, he had showered attention on Elizabeth Rockhurst while the consortium ladies twittered behind their fans at that poor von Hassenberg girl. It wasn't until years later that I realized how exactly lucky I had been, but then the damage was done. I'd become just as cynical and jaded as the rest of the consortium, especially about relationships, which I had avoided like the plague. But no matter how cynical I became, I couldn't escape my younger self, the girl who had just wanted to love me for myself and not because I was the daughter of a high house of von Hassenberg. He was a person of failing, so I armored over the weakness and kept people at arm's distance. If I didn't give them an opening, then they couldn't use me. Locke's continued presence was a gigantic opening. Why would he decide to stick around? Did he realize how vulnerable I was to him? Doubts assailed me. So from this, I wouldn't even expect her, like, she said that she had to be careful around men because of her name, which doesn't necessarily fall outside of this, but we don't see this in any of the other situations. At breakfast, she gets a bunch of messages from her sister saying that the guy she's supposed to be engaged to is threatening war if he doesn't get her dowry with or without her. Instead of just paying the guy for peace, Ada's dad doubled the price on Ada's head so that she's worth more than some of the planets in the dowry. I think daddy could just pay for peace and just let his daughter go at this point. I like, it's all about the power anyway, and I know that daddy wants to put this little spy bug in that family, but also Maybe cut your losses before your planet gets attacked. There is that. Parts of the dowry is a frozen planet used for mining, and Ada is sus that the business over there is doing some sussy stuff. Dude is getting that planet with or without her. That's what Richard is worried about. There's still no sense to this. She assumes that it has something to do with mining the stuff that gives you a hyperspace drive that makes you go faster than anywhere else, and that he wants to monopolize this technology, but she doesn't have any proof. This is just a guess that is coming out of nowhere. And then she wants to go out there and check for herself if there is some kind of sussy mining business going on over there. And this also comes because she realized that Richard's ship goes faster than other people's ships. And that's the only guess that she can make. Locke suggests, quote, "Why not have your father send someone?" Because we're already teetering on the brink of war, and if one of our house ships goes and starts poking around, it could be enough to start a war. And yes, I know father could send someone more low-key, but he wouldn't. That's not how he rolls. I might be able to persuade Bianca to send somebody to check out on the sly, but then I could have just gone there myself. We're talking about war that could put millions of people at risk, and you're going to, the excuse that your daddy isn't going to do it is that's just not how he rolls? I mean, some kings are like that, but your dad deserves to fail. Your family deserves to fail. And also, why do you care? Because you hate your dad, you hate your family, you ran away from this. Like, it's so dumb. Anyway, now the illegal arms dealer is over here saying that war is bad and he's a legitimate businessman. Everybody is obviously coming along to this, and Ada reminds them all of how dangerous it's going to be after checking with everyone that they know what is going down and that it's not going to be an easy travel. It's time for another shopping trip with Veronica. They're preparing to leave, and she threatens the arms dealer that she's supposedly friendly with, quote, "And remember, anything that you see on my ship is confidential." I let a hint of icy warning creep into my tone. "Don't break my trust." Reese lost his veneer of easygoing charm. He looked more like I remembered him from when we first met. He also looked more like Locke. "I owe you a great deal, Lady Ada," he said softly, "and I respect you in equal measure. I will not betray you or your secrets, but do not threaten me again." I nodded once again. "I apologize," I said. Hopefully, when he saw Lynn, he would understand my caution. "And you owe me nothing," I added. "Our debt has long since been settled. If anything, I owe you." "We will have to agree to disagree," Reese said. I tried before to tell Reese that he didn't owe me anything, but the man was nearly as stubborn as me. Of course, everybody is always in oment of this, in debt. Look, I know real words. I just like to make up other words on the fly. It goes on for pages about their relationship and background, but the fact that she treated him like this would show that she has zero trust for him, doesn't respect him, and it undermines the relationship that it wants to pretend that they have. When writing, you need to consider what the years and experiences they have together have done for their relationship, the implications, the trust, the respect, and how something like this would be a straight up insult. Imagine somebody that you thought was your best friend, that you could rely on, that was part of your family, that, you know, you thought you had a mutual understanding of each other, and then they said, "Hey, sure, you can come along on this thing, but also I'm going to threaten you. If you step out of line, I'm going to fuck up your shit." And you're like, "Excuse me, I thought that was a given. We are," like, what? If you think that you are part of my family and then you got to threaten me to behave, that relationship is just changed. Okay, sweetie. The fact that she greets him like that and then goes on to say that they have a long relationship shows that the relationship is shallow and she thinks nothing of him. Now, this might be the author reaching so they can make the character look more like a badass, but this doesn't make them look like a badass. It undermines your character's relationships and independence from the author. If Ada trusted him, then she wouldn't even have needed to make that threat. But they're not friends, you're not friendly, you're not allies. You have a superiority issue / ego, or you wouldn't be acting like you are his superior. Not only that, yet another case of who is forever in her debt for everything, even though she doesn't think so. She's got to be the humble one. He has to be the one that's like, no, I'm never going to be able to repay you, when in all actuality, he has. But you can tell me if you think that Reese still owes her after everything that they have been through. Quote, I tried to tell Reese that he didn't owe me anything, but the man was nearly as stubborn as me. The first time I'd met him, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I spent months tracking him down on a rumor that he had an insider line on Yamato's newest weapons. House von Hasenberg very much wanted to examine them, but we hadn't been able to break into the supply chains. Even after I found him, it took weeks of careful negotiations to set up an in-person meeting. But Reese, never content to only do one illegal thing, was also an expert forager, and it turns out that he'd forged documents for a person of interest to House von Hasenberg, who had folded underneath questioning and given Reese up. So, while I was undercover trying to negotiate for the weapons, my own freaking house had raided his warehouse. I wasn't about to trash months of work for that little forgery, plus by then I'd already gotten to know Reese enough to like and respect him. I broke cover and bailed his ass out of trouble. After that, I funneled as much house business his way as I could, and when he talked about expanding his business, I gave him the loan the bank wouldn't. In return, Reese had never betrayed me, even after I left the house. He set up a new burner identity and forwarded me info that he had on where Father's security forces were searching. He repaid my loan with interest, which gave me a tidy little off-the-books profit. I trusted him almost as much as I trusted my sisters, and that was no small thing. Well, then she wouldn't have said, hey, don't betray us. But she goes over what she's going to look at on the planet, and then if it's what she thinks, she's going to use that to negotiate her freedom from this marriage situation. And then she finds Locke at the gym and tells him how awkward this is, that he's still around and hasn't left yet, but they'd slept together. He's like really mad because she wouldn't have had sex with him if she knew that he was going to stick around, because she doesn't trust people like that. And without it being some deeper ploy to take advantage of her for her name. He's mad because he's like, when did I ever freaking give you any interpretation, any hint that I only slept with you because of who your freaking name was? They're going back and forth with this this mid-romance novel argument. Quote, you tied my hands neatly, haven't you? Deny it and you'll think that I'm lying. Agree and I'm an evil bastard. Because, you know, he can't just say, no, you're wrong, but okay. He should probably be madder that she'll always consider him a liar, and there's no way for him to get around that. Quote, I should have seen it coming from a consortium, bitch, he continued with a sneer. You only care about your precious house. I'm good enough to fuck, but not good enough for anything else. Did you enjoy slumming it with the most wanted man in the verse? Because I didn't hear any complaints when my cock was inside of you. I accept this dude's a criminal. I accept that he is ex-military, so potty mouth as you will. But I hate that this stuff always has to be said in the exact same way, with the exact same level of graphic spite. She doesn't like the way that he is talking to her. So let's be real. We're 55% of the way through here. We have to force more fake drama. So she says, I want to hurt him. I've had better. Now get off my ship. He says no. She says fine, but go sleep in a different room. So like it was all just BS anyway. Oh my gosh. No consequences, no struggle. Nothing matters. And then when she says anything, it still doesn't matter and she just lets it go. So what's that teach you? They're forced to sit together to eat as Veronica's cooked, and Ada didn't want to look rude by, like, passing over the meal. And then it turns out that Reese is telling Ada what a great guy Locke is, and how Locke has sacrificed himself in the military situation for him and his squad. Though, you know, you'd think that that would have come in earlier when they all met at Reese's place, the gun place, you know, when they were getting guns and Reese and Locke were going back and forth. Maybe they could have had their bro thing going on instead of him being for real. Jealous, because that seems to be breaking the bro code in a way, but you know, whatever. Ada wants to know more about Locke, but Reese says that she's gonna have to talk to Locke about it if she wants to know more. And she's like, well, we fought, he hates me, so I'm probably never going to know anything else about this situation. And Reese then lectures her, quote, Locke can be as manipulative and conniving as they come, Reese said. He held up a hand to prevent me from interrupting, but he is also one of the most honorable men I know, and honorable men don't take advantage of women, no matter what their name is. He paused and gave me a hard stare. An honorable women don't pursue relationships they have no intentions of committing to. Get your head straight. He tells her what to ask about before he leaves. Then she goes down to the engine room or whatever to look at stuff, make plans, and Locke saw her head down there and followed. She's like, I think he's gonna betray me, but I'll tell him what I know anyways. So Ada's like, I think he's gonna betray me, but I'm gonna tell him everything I know anyways. She gets pissy when he won't tell her about her background and is short with him. And she goes, Reese told me about you, you know, because he's still talking to me. So it looks like her telling him may have been a manipulation tactic to be like, look, I'm trusting you even though I don't trust you, so you should tell me stuff too. Reasonably, Locke says that the dude needs to stay out of his business, and Ada acts like he's being ridiculous. He's like, can we just be civil here, and then you can go on your own way in a little while, and I can go on my own way in a little while, and then whatever. He shyly nods, and she talks about wanting to wreck this prototype ship if it had no defense system, despite her saying how it was so important to Richard and would be a game changer in her society as well. Then we get a little bit more information about the ship. Quote, the deeper I dug into Polaris's system, the more I fell in love. House Rockhurst had spared no expense. Not only did it have the offense and defensive prowess of a small Corvette-class warship, but it also had exceptional stealth and cloaking ability. So she literally just said she wanted to wreck it, but now she's like, it's the greatest thing ever. And also, what is a Corvette class warship? I'm assuming that means that it's an expensive looking warship, but like, are there Corvettes in this universe? Because we've seen no cars. So like, and this falls into the same issue as Sam Fenna's book mentioning animals that didn't exist yet because it was pre-Big Bang. And so then in this, you're like, do they have cars? Is Corvette still a thing in this universe? We don't know. She's fine, and that becomes an issue when you're writing a story and you're referring to things that don't exist for our familiarity, but this is in first person, so then this is saying that she has knowledge of Corvettes. She finally tells the others that she is sussy of Rockhurst, wanting to use this technology to get an edge. Their hyperdrive is struggling, but it's fine, they'll make it. She wants to use this information on Rockhurst because of somehow her having it will make her able to argue for her freedom. She thinks that Richard is hiding this amazing ship from everyone for his benefit, and also worried about everyone finding out that he lost his ship, so then he hasn't told it to anybody. They get to a location where, of course, Ada's gonna do whatever on her own and then go alone because she's a badass, telling the boys not to bother unless it's safe, and she's allowed to risk herself, though. Also, the ship is connected to her and only her, even though it's Richard's. She somehow has hacked it so that it only responds to her DNA. There is no way to get back, and somehow she's still willing to risk everything and everyone, potentially killing them all if she dies. Quote, Polaris, make Reese, Sebastian, and Marcus Locke temporary officers, I said. The ship prompted them to confirm their identities and voice imprints. As temporary first officers, they should be able to pilot the ship, but not add or remove crew, notably me. So they couldn't remove me from the captain's position and take us into safer space. They also wouldn't be able to assign anyone else as captain, so Father would still need me in order to completely secure control over the ship. I hadn't sent my sister the ship's override codes, and they were not codes that I had used before. So if I died, Father would have to spend a great deal of time and effort cracking the codes by brute force. I decided that it was an acceptable risk. So how did she get into it when it was Richard's before? She cracked his code. Is it just because she is the greatest hacker of all time on top of everything else? I cannot even imagine what there is to get out of a story that revolves around one character, one person, everything just does and relies on this one person. And they are the greatest at all. She gives Reese her negotiation terms for her dad, and then she is given technology from her family that she has never seen before, but somehow Reese has. She puts on a show for the reader, mostly, quote, I moved to Locke. I'm sorry that we're not parting on better terms, I said. I drank him in with my eyes, aware that this could be the last time that I would ever see him. I let him see the regret and sadness, the longing and desire that I would never be brave enough to admit to aloud. Then, dropping onto the planet, it reads pretty much the same as Dallas crying out about his pain and sorrow in an empty room just for the reader to see how sorry he was. It's fake. Then it's dropping onto a planet time. As she goes into the bunker, she notices that their airlock safety is done so poorly that she calls it a dick move. They don't have an airlock, basically. She's confronted by Richard and his endless gang of expendables here, and she starts killing people to escape, thinking about how much it sucks, and she'll cry about it later, doing a little dance like Andy from Zenith. She's also yelling at Richard that he needs to stop them if he doesn't want more people to die. That's definitely what reluctance and sadness look like. Richard out here is saying how he'll beat her to death if she doesn't give up. But he needs her as a bargaining chip with her dad. So that really doesn't work either. It's using death as a stake without understanding what death as a stake means or what it looks like. And so when you just throw out death and I'm going to kill you and beat you to death and a bunch of people dropping like flies everywhere, but it doesn't make a difference, it devalues the stake. It doesn't make the stakes look higher. However, as the scene plays on, she does get beat up, but she only passes out. Waking up in her undies in a luxury cell/room/hotel, she thinks about her life and how she ended up here. Quote, "I pushed myself up and pulled on my clothes. I felt better with another barrier between me and the world. I sat on the edge of the cot and contemplated where my life had gone wrong. Perhaps it was when Lady Louisa had thrown mud at me at the consortium event when we were 6. Or, more likely, when I had retaliated by making her eat mud. How was I supposed to know that she was the heir to one of the lower houses? She was a bully, and I had put her in her place. Only because I was a child of a high house, it looked to everyone else as if I was the bully. And clearly, whatever they had given me to knock me out was not entirely out of my system. I tried to pull my thoughts into some semblance of order, with only mild success. Hashtag not a bully. Hashtag it's just dirt." So apparently forcing somebody to eat mud is not a bully move. While she's in captivity and kidnapped, she also reasons why she's allowed to eat now. Quote, "A short while after the room's only door opened and a soldier entered with a tray of food, he sat it on the table without a word and left. The insistent growling of my stomach told me that more than a few hours had passed while I was unconscious. I got up and took a look. The food, waffles with fresh strawberries, eggs, and sausage, smelled divine. It didn't make sense to keep me alive just to poison me with food, so I shrugged and dug in. Besides, Richard knew that I had house-level nanobites that could take care of most toxins. Unless Hal Rushhurst had cooked up some radical new poisons, I would be okay. And while a hunger strike might make a nice political statement, hunger led to weakness, which meant smaller chance of escape. I could be practical when it suited me." She doesn't really seem to understand why she is kidnapped and that it is a political move for a political marriage. And so again, you ask, why is this in here when it doesn't even make any sense for this character? Because she knows what Richard wants from her, and it's not to kill her, because he wants the connection to her family's house. She ran away from the marriage, and also they supposedly were childhood friends. So where is the showing of this supposed relationship that we were told of? Again, it's another thing that this author left out, but just threw the phrase in there. It's something that when you as an author, if you are creating, or you as a writer, need to consider, what were the effects on that relationship? What did that look like? You can't just really say this was their relationship and then not show any signs of it whatsoever. Richard comes in for these bogus negotiations on their marriage. Quote, "We marry, your friends live. You'll be inducted into House Ruckhurst. You will prove your loyalty to the house by sharing everything you know about von Hassenberg's shielding technology, as well as other advanced technology. You will then continue to spy on House von Hassenberg as a sign of your ongoing allegiance to our marriage." I kept my expression placid when I would have liked to tell him where he could shove his proposal. "Will the marriage require consummation?" I asked. His eyes darkened and his gaze raked down my body. "Yes, I expect you to provide me with several heirs." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a part of the agreement? What if I am barren? Are you? I do not have any children, so all available evidence points to yes. That and very good birth control. How many times will you require sexual intercourse per month?" "Per month," he scoffed. "Well, fuck as often as I desire." I pursed my mouth. I do not think so. Once per month until I am pregnant, then 0 until the baby is born. 1 year after birth or miscarriage, we will resume at once per month until the agreed upon number of heirs has been produced. Not having kids when you're in your early 20s is not a sign of being barren, especially when you're on birth control. I know she's lying to him, but it's like, that's so dumb. Nobody believes that. The negotiations end, and she thinks about how Richard has changed since childhood, and then sleeps/meditates. She eats well and remains in her luxury hotel alone, saying that the worst part about being a political prisoner is the boredom. But it was better than being a real prisoner who would probably be starving and laying uncomfortably on the ground. So, like, this isn't that bad, really. It was just whining about cushy accommodations and being fed delicious food on the regular with the threat of having sex with a man that she didn't love. She's mad that her friends were all caught and wants to wring their necks because she found out that they didn't leave when she told them to leave. She especially is angry, like she's making more death threats and is just mad that they didn't listen to her. Immediately after saying that, though, she's upset that Locke hadn't been captured because it means that he did listen to her, and that isn't what she wanted. She curses how her friends stayed behind. Quote, I didn't know what Reese and Veronica were thinking, but they'd put me in a damned difficult position. I had planned for a long game, to wait until someone made a mistake, gave me an opportunity, and then I would strike. Now I had to escape by tomorrow or marry Richard. And houses did not take divorce lightly, or at all. The only way out of a house marriage was a breach of the marriage contract or death. Shit. She's been running around with an outlaw who's killed people. She has killed people, and she really thinks that she has to respect the ideas of marriage/divorce. What? You want to go inside and get a bone? You want to go look for a bone? You want to go look for a bone? You want to go look for a bone? Don't come here. You're like, no. Come here. Oh my goodness. Richard says, Toodles, the marriage contract will be sent over later on a cute little tablet. How's her dad not involved at all in the negotiations with this? Because it has to do with intergalactic war and, not declaring war on her country, on her... However this works, I don't really know. It didn't really describe if it's kingdoms, how this city is set up, any of it. Eventually, Ada is fighting her way out, and Locke comes in to rescue her. There's a fight scene where the baddies are afraid to shoot at her because they don't want to hit her. They move chemicals to do a speed run of the ship while the baddies are afraid to shoot at her. Obviously, they get away. I don't know how this is even a thought. Quote, a chime indicated that the ship still saw me as its captain. Richard hadn't had time to crack my personal codes with brute force, or he hadn't bothered, thinking me safely in his grasp. He likely would have demanded the codes once we were married. I think that would have happened sooner. I mean, he was demanding her body back there. You stole the ship from him. Of course he would take the ship back. He doesn't respect you. He thinks it's your property. What makes you think that he would allow you to have property? It's stupid. She gets back onto the ship, but still has to suffer and pretend that she's at risk. So she's gotta, because she's so OP, but also she's gotta be threatened. Quote, blood soaked the sleeve of my shirt and dripped in a sluggish stream from my fingertips. The bolt had caught me in the outside of my arm, halfway between my shoulders and elbows. A large chunk of flesh was missing, leaving a bloody mess. The hole in my sleeve was singed around the edges, as was my flesh. This was beyond the capabilities of nanobots. They'd had their work cut out for them. Just to stop the bleeding, I swayed lightheaded as renewed pain stabbed me with vicious barbs. Veronica returned with a trauma bandage. You're just lucky that it was an outside hit, she said. Looks like it missed the bone, which will help with recovery. You have to make the situations actually matter and not just be this martyr complex, this suffering complex, where continuously the character suffers again and again and again. It feels, again, like the trope that Parapatina goes through in Iron flame slash fourth wing, where she's constantly just sacrificing herself to be in pain. We saw it also with Isla and Lightlark. We saw it also in The Pawn and the Puppet. And there is just this martyrdom that is like, hurt me instead of you, and then watch me suffer. And I will go through all of this needless pain specifically, but I'm never going to die. And then I'm going to talk about how much suffering it is. And it's just, it doesn't work. There's no stake. So it is just for the sake of getting off to self-sacrificing suffering. She's still in pain when they're safe, of course, and Locke takes her to the med bay where the anesthesia doesn't work, and he's told to get to work anyway because suffering is an aphrodisiac or something. Later on, she's fine. They've lost Richard from their tail, and she's saying that she's grateful, but she's going to yell at everyone for disobeying her. She says what went down with Richard, and she was reading the marriage contract when Veronica responds, quote, "Rockhurst still wanted to marry you? If you want to call it that. He was blackmailing me into a sham of a marriage with a number of threats, including one on your life and Reese's. You wouldn't have gone through with it, right?" Veronica asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "The way the contract was originally written, no. Richard wanted me to feed false information to my house, which would have cost hundreds of thousands of lives. I was modifying it when Locke rescued me. If I could have gotten into a halfway decent state, I would have signed it, only to breach it as soon as the opportunity presented itself. Signing it would have given you and Reese at least a slim chance to escape. But that would mean, trust me, I know what it meant." Veronica bowed her head. "I'm glad that we rescued you from that," she said. "Yeah, you and me both." So this is dumb. Number one, so I skipped the part where she was like literally highlighting everything in the contract to renegotiate it. But if you're a political prisoner, you are not renegotiating your contract. You're a prisoner or you're a negotiator on an equal playing field that can make demands. Number two, we know that she wasn't going to do anything because she was like, I can't get out of a marriage unless there is divorce or death. But here she is talking about wanting to breach it immediately. So again, there are no stakes. It continuously undermines its own stakes and then makes her fear so that you can look like a martyr, so that she can get points to look cool, but none of it matters. And she knows it. And then everybody just golf claps for her when there was never anything at risk. Meanwhile, she also says that she'd make Locke sign a paper to agree to something that she'd been saying she'd breach the contract, proving that nothing matters. She just complains that signing a treaty would have meant that she belongs to Richard, and if she abandoned or broke it, she'd be shunned. So, like, what's it matter? She ran away anyway. Who cares? Locke's over here quietly seething, so she changes the subject to drop Reese off as if he won't be in danger anymore if she does drop him off, as if he won't be hunted by the people like Richard who have his identity now. She's then still suffering and doesn't want to take pain meds because reasons. Also, she's having a bad reaction to the regeneration gel that she was given in the med bay, so more sufferation porn. Just a little bit more and she's given painkillers, and then we're walking again against the stiffness, but since there is no pain, she's like, meh, don't worry about it. So here we retcon why she still has all of her old clothes and devices put into a random hidden drawer not mentioned before so that she can retrieve them now that she needs them, and this is why they weren't claimed by Richard. Then she's surprised to find that her planet is now at war with Rockhurst. Quote, House Rockhurst had declared war on House von Hessenberg. Father had responded in kind. House Yamato remained neutral for now, but the various lower houses were already choosing sides. We're at war, I said, as if voicing the words would make it feel more real. The last full-scale war between high houses spanned 2 decades, claimed nearly 10 million lives, and resulted in one less high house in the galaxy. So she caused this. She's not going to accept responsibility for having caused this, and she is going to never acknowledge her part in this. Also, I think it would be fair for Richard to have said, hey, your daughter murdered a bunch of my guys after having ran away, but we have no idea how this meeting with her dad went down. But her dad also knows that she is disobedient. So I don't think that they should have gone to war. I don't know how this actually happened. If her dad wanted peace, it's just really bad. And she did nothing to try to subvert this. So she can't really pretend that she cares about the people that are now going to die. She tried to undermine her dad at every case. She tried to run away, or she did run away and then kept away for 2 years where somehow nothing happened during those 2 years. She can't pretend to care. Somehow the royal family also goes into the front lines. Quote, I met Veronica's eyes. I need you to think very seriously about your future. I can still try to take you with me as a cabinet member, but only if it is what you want. Houses at war are not the safest places. I will be sent to the front lines. If you don't travel with me, my protection will be limited. Does she know what front lines means? Because that usually means, like, with the soldiers, right? But why would they send the children of the royal family to the front lines? So she's going back to her home planet now because the war has happened and she needs to talk to her daddy finally and needs security details. So Locke offers it, even though he is a wanted criminal. They're just going to have him wear a cloak and use a fake name and hope nobody catches that it's him. But in order to get that position, he has to share his background with being a soldier and what all that entailed. Quote, we signed our rights away without reading the contracts because our supervisors told us that everything was on the up and up. The scientists tinkered with our DNA. My eyes are not ocular implants, they're genetically engineered. I gaped at him. The sanctity of DNA was one of the foundational principles of the consortium. We might introduce nanobots into our bloods or augment ourselves with biomechanical implants, but our DNA, the core of who we are, was strictly off limits. It had been that way from the beginning of the Royal Consortium. Genetic engineering could still be found, of course, deep in the black market, but only the most desperate would risk it because it carried a consortium death sentence for both provider and patient. Soldiers started dropping right from the beginning, but they didn't cancel the project. It was hell. My squad was the only one that made it through, and only just, he said. Old pain laced his voice. It makes no sense. It's still changing your body. This book so wants to do everything and not do everything at the same time. You are genetically engineered when you have nanobots inside of your body. Also, implants, especially if they change your abilities. I don't know, that's just me. Quote, no, at the time, he was an older ship. He was a passel of military advisors with him, but he ignored our advice and ordered us to attack. We were all sent to quell the rebellion by killing women and children, which is probably why House Rockhurst didn't proclaim his involvement. Yes, the best way to quell a rebellion is to kill the women and children. Also, quote, Locke shook his head in disgust at the memory. At that point, we all knew that the only way out for us was death. As the squad leader, it was my responsibility, so I killed them. Then I really did kill the bastards in charge, and I did it, and I'd do it again too in a heartbeat. If I could get my hands on Richard, I'd kill him too. Unfortunately, the fucker seems to know about my abilities and has taken precautions every time I've gotten close. Why didn't you go to the consortium? Locke laughed without humor. Who do you think funded the whole thing, sweetheart? And who increases my bounty year after year? House Rockhurst might have owned Fort Knox Zero, but all three high houses approved of the Genesis project. She's learning that she wants to change her ID in the system to hide herself from DNA matches before thirsting for Locke's genetically engineered alluring eyes. Quote, I'd been fascinated by his eyes from the beginning, and knowing that they were genetically engineered didn't detract from their allure. She's fascinated, wants to know more. They make apologies to one another to work together, and also because he's hot. Mostly because he's hot. They agree on her trying to get him a pardon so that he can work with her, and it'll probably work because the consortium only wants internal scandal and not external scandal. I think you need to figure that out a little bit better. Then they go off to have sex, despite the fact that she's injured, or at least they go off to make out. While she's hopped up on pain meds, so much that she can barely walk and can't unfasten her own bra. Maybe if you want to pretend that there are stakes in any of these stories when the badass female character takes damage, stop trying to have sex while they're heavily injured. It's not badass, it's not cute, it's careless, stupid, and annoying. Iron Flame / Fourth Wing did the same thing. She works on her demands again now that she has freedom, I guess forgetting that she gave them to Reese earlier to argue for her. And this ship, and one of the things is she wants this ship in exchange for letting her dad look at the ship for 3 months. So she wants it forever, and she'll never turn herself in, and she'll never be captive to her father, and she'll never give up her freedom. She also wants complete immunity for her team, freedom forever, and to go as she pleases. Everything for pretty much nothing. Her dad gets to look at the ship that she stole for 3 months, and that ship is going to also cause the war with the Rockhursts, because I highly doubt that Richard is the only one that knows about this ship among the Rockhursts. She sends a copy of her demands to Bianca just in case her dad gets carried away with I don't know what. She's the one that's getting carried away. She then goes looking for Locke and finds him. Quote, Locke was doing deadlifts with some ridiculous amount of weight. He wore a pair of low-slung athletic shorts and no shirt. Watching the muscles play across his body as he lifted the weight was a thing of beauty. She then challenges him to a duel while her arm is still healing from being shot, and he accepts. Again, stupid. He needs to just say no to show that there is some meaning in the story, some value to the pain, not, well, we're just going to go ahead and do it because it really doesn't matter. It devalues every single moment in this book that this story, and everything after this. It makes me not trust the author because the author continuously breaks their own rules set up, their own scenarios set up. So she's so much in pain that she can't do anything, but she can also spar. Great, cool. So pain, injuries, nothing matters. He does hit her while they're fighting, but the whole point of this was so that he could tackle her and get her in a sexual position so he could grind up against her. After she's worried about being neurotic no matter what her dad responds with. She gets more gear from Veronica, who apparently notices the exact style and brand of shoes that Ada has been wearing and bought 4 pairs for her to choose from. She's worried about her father finding something in the contract to invalidate it when he can literally just reject all of the terms within it or break the contract. She is the one that is in trouble. He is the one with the power because he is the king or whatever you want to call for this, and she is the subordinate. They can shun her as a family. She says, Daddy is so sneaky, but bro, you're also trying to manipulate all of the power that you can out of your father, and you're using, we need to stop that war because last time the war killed 10 million people. Obviously, everybody tells Ada that they are staying when they're going to go and confront her father. Locke brags about going in to meet her father while bragging about being dangerous, and it's time that they think about him that way. As if, you know, the entire royal family or whatever are not, and the galaxy have put a giant thing on his head, a giant target on his head because they don't think he's dangerous. Obviously, they think he's dangerous. That's why he's worth so much. He's a genetically engineered soldier who's killed a bunch of people with the highest bounty in the galaxy. Then it's time to head home. Quote, the thought didn't fill me with the warmth that I thought it would. I felt vaguely uneasy. I'd changed a lot in the last 2 years. I wasn't as naive or trusting, and while I was still loyal to the House von Hasenberg, I'd lost the rose-colored glasses. I wasn't sure that my family would appreciate the changes, especially when they arrived along with the convicted murderer/bodyguard and a lot of uncomfortable questions about Genesis Project. How can she even say that she is loyal when she left? She'd been running for 2 years. She wasn't communicative. She started a war. She's attacking one of their theoretical allies, possible allies. She will not sacrifice herself for her family, and she hates her parents. She's the furthest thing from loyal. She would undermine her parents at any given chance. Apparently, when she gets to her royalty house, no one is waiting for her despite being a runaway royal, and she uses the back door to which no one even says anything, no one is watching, and nobody reports that she has come in. Everybody just ignores it. So great security there at the House von Hasenberg. Quote, I don't know why I expected father to be waiting with open arms, but I guess childhood dreams are the slowest to die. What childhood dreams? She didn't love him. She didn't want him. She's talked about how much she's hated him before. You sent him a list of demands, and you weren't exactly warm to him either. It doesn't sound like you've ever been warm to him. So again, this is one of those situations where outside of the context of the story, of what we see on the page, there needs to be the development of what these relationships look like from off the page, what the expectations are from off the page. And often with stories like this, it seems like the author doesn't put the effort into showing what the relationship is on the page. They just tell you what it is or what the character hopes it is, and you're just supposed to take it at face value. But it is something. There are lives that happen that are not on the page, and then we get to see the results of those lives. And so if the characters hate each other, and she's talked about hating her father, then we're not going to believe in any of these things where she's like, well, those dreams of me hoping to come home to my daddy with his arms open wide, why would that ever be that? That is just an empty platitude that doesn't feel connected to this character in in any way because she has said how she doesn't care about her father, period. She hates him. She works actively against him with her siblings. So why would she say that? She could say, hey, I wish my dad loved me, because that could have done it, but she knows she doesn't have that relationship. So authors, creators, other people, know that when you are creating, if you want to create an authentic, fully felt out story, then you need to consider what the relationships are, how they were built, that we never see. There is so much work that goes into creating a cohesive story, a world that feels lived in, that we don't necessarily see on the page, but we see it in the way that characters interact. So if you look at like the beginning of Bodymore period, it could be Bodymore 1 or Bodymore 0 when they've got different protagonists, and you already see the relationship between the characters that has happened off the page. And then you kind of, as you go forward, you learn more about it. There's this tendency among novice authors that think you either need to tell the reader exactly what the relationship is from the very beginning. You know, they'll be like, my name is Rebecca Green, and my best friend Jonathan and I have, been together since we were in kindergarten, and I really care about him. So, that their relationship right up. Or they think that you just do what this book does, that anytime you say something, that becomes the new rule, and anything from the past never existed. And that's not good storytelling, and it's not coherent, and it doesn't equal anything. So then you get to this stuff where she's like, I wish daddy had been there. No, what would have made it make more sense is if she was starting to shake, if she was starting to feel sick, getting in there to talk to her dad because she knew how much power her dad had. She knew her dad saw her as a tool, wanted to use her as a tool, and she was coming at this from an I want freedom, but that's not really a logical argument. And she needed to figure out how to make a logical argument to her father, because her father thinks in strategy, not in family. So she needed to argue in that direction. And she knows that her father is cold, but we haven't seen her in any other situation where she's looking at relationships. Like, she could have looked at Veronica and Veronica's child and actually had quiet moments of seeing how Veronica is with her child and treating her child like family. And that's not a relationship that Ada ever had with her parents, because her parents see her as a tool. But we don't get that. So consider that when you are writing in the future. If you are listening to this as a writer, the way that you strengthen your characters, the way that you strengthen your story and make it feel lived in, is these relationships exist outside of what we see on the page. And then how they interact, what they think of each other, will be in anywhere that it is on the page, is influenced by those relationships that are not on the page. The story lives without you. And so when you see this garbage, it's you breaking the rules of your own story and showing that you don't care. At least that's how I read it. After dealing with her father, where she reminds us how she has her public face on, she's so brave because she was scared, and her dad tells her, don't push him. She goes to introduce her sister Bianca to Locke, and this is, quote, Bianca, meet Marcus Locke, I said when he reached my side. Marcus, meet my sister Bianca. You can take off the cloak. Locke threw back his hood. His face was set in hard, forbidden lines. He crossed his arms over his chest and stared down at Bianca. He looked as welcoming as an Arctic tundra. If you hurt her, Bianca said softly, her smile still in place, I will gouge you with a rusty fork. Locke blinked, then raised an eyebrow. Think you can? Absolutely, she said with utter certainty. You know how stupid it is to have all of your characters act the exact same in every scenario? They are all the same. Ingratiate yourself. It would not be hard. I know that she has got to do her, like, I'm a sister, so I got to protect my other sister, but you can also show variance where all of the characters are not constantly threatening each other. Because how is this different than when Reese met Marcus? Or how is this guy not being like, yes, of course, I will take care of your sister. Ingratiate yourself. Make yourself worthy of her sister and of her respect, instead of constantly threatening each other and acting like you are a bunch of low-rent thugs. After the friendly threats are done, Bianca is informed of the plan and Project Genesis and the pardon. She's excited to get started looking into this. I'm kind of surprised that none of the kids were aware of any of these plans when somebody's going to have to take over. Somebody has to be training underneath dad. And if that's not something that comes up later, please. And then we meet Ian Bishop, who is a guardsman, a head guardsman, and he is the guy that they're demanding immunity for Locke without verifying his identity. We get this bizarre line, quote, Ian stared at me for a few seconds as if judging my seriousness. Then he smiled. Bianca's eyes widened before she regained her icy control. She had it bad, but he was incredibly gorgeous when he smiled, and I wondered what would happen if I accidentally locked them in the closet together. Who thinks like this? Raise your hand in the comments. Have you ever thought about your family members in this way? Bianca acts so awkward and weird and obvious to Ian, despite the fact that they're all supposed to have public faces that they are so good at, but she can't possibly use it on this one guy. Where now she's just mean to him to try and be less awkward because she has a crush on him. Later, Ada finds out that Locke has gifted her the impractical red dress from the shop that she saw earlier, that she was like, I can't possibly buy that. When would I ever wear that? And he's like, joke's on you. I got it for you and you're going to wear it for me. Quote, I met Locke's eyes in the mirror. I'm going to wear this dress to your pardon hearing, I said, and then when we get home, I'm going to demand that you remove the dress slowly with your teeth, I said with a saucy grin. Also, we find out, quote, my parents may not be the nicest people in the universe, huge understatement, but my siblings would never do something to hurt me, and betray you would hurt me. Our parents had tried to drive us apart, to pit us against one another, but it had massively failed, and everything they tried just drove us closer together. How is that strategic? Like, they're against all of the other houses and want to use their kids as spies in other houses. For what purpose? Is it to build up their family legacy, to build up their family power? So then why would you pit the kids against one another? Unless you think some of those kids are not worthy of the family name, in which case, get rid of them. So, like, I need some logic behind why the parents would do this, because you would want a strong family unit when you're creating spies, because you would want the loyalty within the spies so that the spies don't defect to going to other houses. Because if you make them all hate each other, but they actually find out that you hate them and want them against each other, then they're going to go find allies in other places. So what is the strategy here? What is dad planning to do when all of his kids hate him because he's pitted them all against each other and used them as tools? I don't see the overall reasoning behind this. It's just making dad to be the evilest of evil characters, working against everything that the main character wants, but not for any logical reason that would actually make sense for a character to have those actions. Locke won't be coming to dinner with Ada's family. This shouldn't be a surprise when all of the food is by request. All her siblings are coming to her suite instead of her going to theirs, which is weird since she's been missing for 2 years. You'd think that she would be the guest in one of their houses, but instead it's the other way around. Also, of course, she looks nothing like her siblings. She actually looks like her mother, where all of her siblings look like her evil father. So if that's not some kind of evil coding for the future, because this is a book 1 out of like 3 or 4 books, I don't know what is. Her younger sister looks more like her and her mother, though. Skip through all of the dinner, which isn't even anything important, to just telling each other embarrassing stories about each other and her missing Locke. Yeah, war's hanging overhead, and this is what we're doing. After dinner, Bianca asks her about sleeping with the most dangerous convict in the galaxy, devil of whatever, and Ada's like, he's so hot. Like, how could I say no? You know, making everyone act like something crazy is not crazy, and everyone acting that way is how you take power away from it. It is the actual response that gives weight to any decision or any action in a story that you use. So if everybody just deflates and goes, that's not so crazy, that's pretty normal, then it's not going to look crazy. It's not going to look badass because everybody is just... Think of it this way. Going back to the Kiryu example, every time he does something... I think more often with Kiryu than even with Yagami, and Yagami kicks booty, is people go, and they're like crawling on the ground and they're trying to get away and they're like, oh my gosh. That shows authority. That shows fear. That shows hierarchy. That's what you want. And then we get more with Bianca where she is saying she's just playing being a sad widow. She's glad that her husband is dead. What reason is there to read any of this? They're all flat people, if not despicable, where they plan to murder people. They all are spies. There's nothing good about any of them. You just have hot, maybe. The description of hot abs that she wants to eat dinner off of. Nothing matters. It's just bad people winning over other bad people. And you might say that's like reality television. Yeah, that is an audience for this, I guess. The little sister isn't cooperating, and the little sister isn't cooperating with what her destiny is supposed to be, which is obviously the same as everybody else, marrying an arranged marriage so that she can become a spy. And they're like, we have to get her out of here or kill her husband too. What if he doesn't want to marry either? Like, what if this is forced by his parents? Whatever. So you have this good guy, bad guy coding in the rebels looking like the main character and non-rebels looking like her dad. Now skip forward like a week and we have Ada saying that she is working 18-hour days doing I don't know what. She just says, I'm working 18 hours a day, coming home, passing out, working the next day as dad tells me to, and I'm losing my mind. So I'm going to go in and tell them I'm taking time off. So are you able to make decisions for yourself or no? Did you make a deal with your dad or no? Because it sounds like you made a deal with your dad to get something. So he's like, okay, go and work. And now you're like, you know what? Cancel that. So again, no consequences, nothing matters. And there's going to be no issue with her just canceling on the deal that she made with her dad. When she goes into work the next day, she tells the guy that she is taking the day off. The guy she tells the scientist she's working with she's taking the day off, and if anybody bothers her, she's going to kill them. So again, I don't see her having any remorse for her murdering anybody. She is just a villainess. This is a villainous story as far as I'm concerned. And she goes back to tell Locke that it'll be dangerous for them to pursue his freedom, but she is happy to do it because she's got a martyr fetish. He hates seeing her work so hard, and there is no way for him to fix it. She just has to work because it's pushed on her, and he just wants to make her day better, but he can't. She goes to Bianca's room where Bianca is like, wow, you got the day off? And she's like, well, no, not really. I threatened to have the day off, and they didn't want to see if I would kill them if they kept messing with me. So there we go. Bianca's not even surprised, so I guess the death threats are normal. Ada then has to go to a house gala to talk to the other house leaders about Project Genesis or whatever. I don't know. She can't just show up for them, I guess. But again, it's just to force this circumstance that's dangerous for show. Because she goes, it's not good. It's dangerous for us to go, but I'm going to go anyway. And Locke can't go because it's too dangerous for him. When Bianca and Ian show up, he says that it's for protection purposes, but he's the only one on detail. But then he also says that he's short-staffed and the king doesn't involve himself with the matters of protection of the royal family. Excuse me? If I stop caring at this point because the ending is just cliff notes. Because this book doesn't care about itself as far as I'm concerned. Ada threatens the Lady Rockhurst and gets Yamada's dad to turn on murderous Yamada's son. Another Peripatina moment. So at the party, she approaches the Rockhurst family, which, you know, is Richard's parents, and she stole from them, and they are currently at war, declared war, mind you, over her actions. So she threatens the Rockhurst family that they need to talk to her because she's got information that pertains to illegal activities they were doing. And then she goes to the other house, the Yamadas, who would also know that that Ada here is at war with the Rockhursts. She caused the war, and she tells the King Yamada that he needs to talk to her about this project. And Hitoshi Yamada, the oldest son, the one who abandoned Veronica on that planet and was still paying child support, mind you, he gets mad and wants to murder Ada because obviously can't have anybody not hating her. She is a lightning rod of hate because of the fetish. After all of this goes down, they find out that her dad has Locke and execution is coming because they know who he is. When she's literally holding a blaster to her family and the other houses, she's surprised that her dad threatens to disown her for her actions. Quote, I will disown you for this, he promised. Even though I knew it would likely come down to this, hurt sliced through my system. Family was everything to a high house, not for sentimental reasons, but in order to maintain a strong, powerful house. I couldn't remember the last time someone was disowned. Sure, you're a traitor and you're shooting your allies and starting a war, but you're utterly surprised that you would be kicked out of the house and disowned for doing this. Quote, As part of a high house, no matter what happened, you knew the house would have your back. So did everyone else. Even when I left home, I knew that even when I left home, I knew that if things ever went completely sideways, that I could just reveal my identity, and House von Hassenberg would do whatever it took to get me out. By threatening to remove the protections of our house, Father had just promised that everyone who held a grudge against House von Hassenberg in general, or me in particular, would target me because there would be no house retaliation. I would become the most hunted woman in the verse, with or without a bounty. And maybe you should have thought about that before you turned on your house. She's saying that it was a protection, that it was in order for a strong, powerful house. But one, where is her family showing that? Two, her dad tried to turn her siblings against each other. That doesn't create a strong house. So again, we're contradicting just to make this situation. And then she's whining about something. So maybe she is just an idiot, and we're just supposed to take this as her being an idiot. But she's rewarded constantly, so I don't think it has to do with her being an idiot. But I can't accept when a main character is an idiot and they make bad decisions, and then those bad decisions slap them in the face. Quote, my temper flared, but I was encased in the ice of my public persona. I looked down my nose at her and arched a single imperious eyebrow. She didn't wilt like most of whom I hit with the expression, but that had never been my intention. I needed to provoke one of them into making a mistake. Do I need to shoot you again? I asked, because it would be my pleasure. So that was in response to Lady Rockhurst telling her that, no duh, you're going to get disowned. Of course you're going to get disowned. And she's like, oh, do I need to shoot you again, bitch? She needs the others to make a mistake so that she can justify something. She's literally already shooting them at this point. She has a blaster out. She's shooting the nobles. Where else is there to go? Just go. You're a terrorist, Ada. That's what you are. You showed up at a political event after you started a war, threatening everybody, and now shooting the nobles. You're a terrorist. She makes them give in to everything that she wants and pretends that she is at any kind of and pretends that she is at some kind of disadvantage by not being able to return to her home. But she's fine, and she's won everything, and she's been away from her home for 2 years anyway. She was never going to come back anyway. She's just like, but then I can't see my family, but my siblings can come and see me elsewhere. So really, it's not that big of a deal, honestly. Despite her shooting nobles, some of which who had already declared war on her family and threatening to kill people and running a terror event, she is offended when her dad wants her to leave the planet ASAP and wishes that she could shoot him for asking her to leave as soon as possible. Still, she's also given private minutes alone in her bedroom to collect whatever it is she wants to collect, and that's where she empties out her bank account. Somehow that's not frozen. It hasn't been frozen for the 2 years that she was AWOL. Eventually, they all fly off, and there's a moment where Ada feels possessive of Locke because there's this hot woman who appears for a second, and she's all insecure. But Locke and her are solid, and they tell each other that they belong together, ending with a sex scene with undulating, pebbled nipples and sucking tongues. The war is still going on, BT dubs, and she's going to, quote, do her best to help her siblings. But literally, it's all her fault that the war is happening, and now she's just running away while they can deal with the war that's going to kill their people, their kingdom. I don't know, maybe her dad and Rockhurst should work together because Ada is the problem in all of this. There's no reason to cooperate anymore, honestly. So last couple of notes. I don't have too many because most of it is written within the story notes. But number one, presentation of danger causes tension. Respecting limitations and having to work around them is much more interesting than everything just working out okay at the first attempt. Being the baddest of the bad at everything isn't interesting. You can make it interesting, but it has to matter. It has to play into the story. And when you are the biggestest of everything, it's not interesting. Even small things have no stakes, like she gets it all back immediately. She does whatever she wants. An example of how everything is meh, Bianca asks, how angry? And she says, murderous, I said flatly. Perhaps we should mingle over there. This kills the tension. They don't care. No one should care about any of this. When your characters are all over the top, when they all sound the same, when they are all just murderous, rampaging whatevers, and they all just dismiss, your characters are just as bad as the baddies you want us to hate. And the only thing that we're supposed to hate about Richard over here is that he is lecherous. Apparently not the only lecherous one in the galaxy. I'm just saying. The only difference between Richard and Locke is that we've commented on how hot Locke is when he is being lecherous. the main character in this book, Ada, has been continuously lecherous of Locke. So then you're like, well, what has Richard done? Richard has put forward a contract saying, I'm gonna fuck you, and looked at her, and has not been described as hot. I can understand her not wanting to marry this guy for business purposes. She was raised to do that, but there's not enough investment in the intrigue, in the opposition of this relationship, and she's not even bothering to work with her father to try to get him to understand her position. And so there are no consequences. So she obviously gets to shoot up a political party and get away with it with no problems. So there's that. But that was Polaris Rising by Jessie Mihalik. I will not be reading any more books by this author. I don't remember where this book came from, and if this was recommended by you, why? Now I must ask, have you read this book? Will you read this book? Do you like the label sci-spice? With that said, have a great weekend, and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?